Story 1. My family didn't invite me to Christmas because it's no place for losers. My brother, Lucas, I calmly agreed and stopped funding his children and his wife, Amanda. Now he's going crazy. I was actually looking forward to Christmas this year. For once, I wasn't scrambling at the last minute to get everything together. By the first week of December, I bought presents for everyone. My parents, my brother Lucas, his wife Amanda, and their kids. I even bought extras just in case anyone brought unexpected guests. I don't know. I just felt like this year was going to be special. So, I was completely blindsided when, as I stood on my parents' front porch with bags of wrapped presents in each hand, my mom opened the door and said, "We don't want you here this year." At first, I thought it was some kind of weird joke. I started to laugh a little, but then Lucas's voice cut in from behind her. "This is no place for losers," he said. "You're really starting to wear on all of us." I just stood there staring at her. My dad was in the background, not saying a word, just looking awkwardly everywhere but at me. My mom looked uncomfortable but didn't back away, and Lucas looked downright smug. I felt this onslaught of emotions. Confusion, anger, embarrassment. But somehow I stayed calm. I just nodded, said, "Fine, if that's how you feel," and walked back to my car. But as I sat there in the driveway, staring at the bags of presents in the passenger seat, something inside me changed. No place for losers? Tired of me? Where was this coming from? I had a pretty good idea Lucas was behind it, but I couldn't figure out why. I've been nothing but generous to him and his family over the years. I'd helped pay for his kids' school supplies, cover their summer camp fees, and even pitched in on his mortgage when things got tight. And now, out of the blue, I'm not welcome at Christmas? I decided I wasn't going to leave just yet. I was going back to the door to get some answers. I left the presents in the car and went back to the door. My parents were still standing there, whispering to each other as if they hadn't expected me back. Lucas was lounging on the couch, scrolling through his phone, acting as if nothing had just happened. I didn't bother to knock. "What's going on?" I asked, stepping inside. "Why am I not welcome at Christmas? What did I do?" Lucas grinned without even looking up from his phone. "You really don't get it, do you? You've been slacking off lately. The kids have barely gotten anything from you this year." I stared at him, stunned. "What are you talking about? I've spent hundreds on presents for your kids. They have more presents in the car than anyone else." Lucas finally looked at me. "Last year you did more. This year it's like you don't care. It's embarrassing for us, honestly." I turned to my parents, expecting them to say something, maybe defend me or tell Lucas he was out of line. Instead, my mom gave me this awkward smile and said, "But you just bought a new car. You found money for it." For a second, I didn't even know how to respond. "The car is on credit," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And even if it wasn't, how does buying a car suddenly make me responsible for Lucas's kids? They're not my responsibility." "You're the one who makes the most money," Lucas said, leaning back on the couch as if this was all perfectly reasonable. "We're a family. Families help each other. You've always done that." I looked at Amanda, his wife, who was sitting quietly in the corner. She hadn't said a word, but her face was flushed and she was staring down at her hands. She looked as if she wanted to disappear. "Is that your reasoning?" I asked. "Because I've been generous in the past, I'm now obligated to do so forever? And if I don't, I'm a loser." Lucas shrugged. "If the shoe fits." That was it for me. I took a step back and shook my head. "You know what? You're right. I don't belong here." I looked at my parents. "Enjoy your Christmas." Then I turned to Lucas and said, "And good luck with those presents, because this loser is done financing your life." I walked out without waiting for an answer. I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel harder than I needed to. Couldn't wrap my head around it. Was I really the bad guy here? I'd gone above and beyond for my family for years, always stepping up when things got tough for Lucas, making sure his kids never felt the pinch of his financial struggles. And now, not only was I not welcome at Christmas, but I was a loser for not doing enough. When I got home, I sat in the driveway for a while, staring at nothing. The bags of presents were still in the car, and the sight of them made me sick to my stomach. I'd spent weeks picking out just the right things, thinking about what the kids would love, what my parents would appreciate. And for what? To be told I didn't belong? The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about Christmas or presents. This had been building for years, and I'd been too blind, or maybe too willing, to see it. The truth was, I'd always been the one Lucas leaned on. Looking back now, I realized that I created this dynamic. I made it too easy for Lucas to rely on me, and somewhere along the way it stopped being gratitude and turned into entitlement. And tonight, being shut out of my own family's Christmas because I didn't do enough, that was the breaking point. The next morning, I woke up with a clear head and made a decision. I was done. No more bailing Lucas out. No more endless gifts to make up for his lack of effort. If he wanted his kids to have the things I provided, he could figure it out for himself. It wasn't an easy decision. Cutting off my brother didn't just mean cutting off financial support. It meant risking my relationship with him, with his children, and maybe even with my parents. But I couldn't go on being treated like an ATM instead of a brother and a son. I didn't reach out to anyone, and they didn't reach out to me. I thought maybe they got the message, but I should have known Lucas wouldn't let it go that easily. The silence stretched through New Year's Eve. No phone calls, no texts, nothing. For the first time in years, I spent the holidays completely alone. I won't lie. Part of me thought about calling, but every time I picked up the phone, I remembered Lucas's smirk and his words, "No place for losers." I'd been the one holding things together for years, and they had the audacity to treat me like I was disposable. No, if they wanted distance, I'd give it to them. By mid-January, I began to feel the change. Amanda had always been quiet, the kind of person who avoided conflict, but one night I got a text from her out of the blue. It was short and to the point. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I don't agree with what happened. Lucas won't hear it from me, but I thought you should know." I sat staring at my phone for a long time, not sure how to respond. On the one hand, it felt good to know that someone in the family saw things for what they were. On the other hand, Amanda had been silent that night, and her apology now felt like too little, too late. I finally replied, "I appreciate it, Amanda, but this isn't something I can just move on from now." She didn't push the conversation further, and that was fine with me. Then, in early February, Lucas showed up at my house unannounced. I was in the middle of a work meeting when I heard the knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I ignored it at first, but the knocking didn't stop. When I finally opened the door, there he was, Lucas, looking more disheveled and frustrated than I'd ever seen him. "We need to talk," he said, stepping inside before I could stop him. I crossed my arms. "What's this about?" He got right to the point. "You need to stop acting like this and start helping out again." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe he meant it. "Helping out? You mean paying for your life? I told you I'm done with that." He glared at me. "You're the one with the money. Do you know how hard it's been for us since you decided to act like this? The kids barely have what they need. Amanda's trying to keep it together, but we can't do it without your help." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you listening to yourself right now? You're a grown man, Lucas. You have a wife and children. If you need more money, go out and earn it. It's not my job to solve your problems." "You've always helped before," he shot back. "Why are you being so selfish now?" "Selfish?" I repeated. "You want to talk about being selfish? Let's talk about how you lied to our parents about me, turned them against me, and then banned me from Christmas because I didn't spend enough on your kids. And now you're here asking for more? You've got some nerve, Lucas." He started to say something else, but I held up a hand to stop him. "We're done here. I'm not giving you another dime, and I don't want to hear from you again until you figure out how to act like an adult." He stood there for a moment, glaring at me before finally storming out. After Lucas stormed out, I thought that would be the end of it for a while. He'd maybe complain to my parents, but eventually he'd figure out I wasn't going to back down. I was wrong. 2 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I wouldn't have answered, but something told me to pick up. "Hello, is this Michael?" a man's voice asked. "Yeah, who's this?" This is Mark Dawson. I'm a lawyer. I represent a client who has recently expressed concern about certain financial matters involving your family. Do you have a moment to discuss them? I froze. A lawyer? What financial matters? I can't go into detail over the phone, he said, his tone overly polite. But it involves financial contributions you've made to your brother, Lucas, and his family, specifically your use of those contributions. Would you be willing to come to my office for a discussion? I didn't know what to say. My mind was racing with possibilities. Had Lucas taken out a loan in my name? Was he using my information for something shady? Or was this a desperate attempt to guilt me into giving him money again? Who's your client? I finally asked. There was a brief pause. I'm afraid I can't disclose that right now, but I assure you this is not a lawsuit against you. It's more of an investigation. Against my better judgment, I agreed to a meeting. Curiosity got the better of me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than just Lucas being Lucas. When I walked into Mark Dawson's office the next day, I wasn't sure what to expect. But as soon as I sat down, he dropped a bombshell. The client I'm representing is Amanda, he said, pushing a folder across the desk toward me. I blinked, completely taken by surprise. Amanda? Why would she need a lawyer? Mark folded his hands and watched me closely. She believes Lucas has been using the money you've given him over the years inappropriately. She has reason to believe he's been hiding money from her and from you. My stomach turned. Hiding money? What do you mean? He opened the folder, revealing copies of bank statements, receipts, and what looked like screenshots of text messages. She suspects Lucas has been taking your financial contributions and funneling them into a separate account. Based on what she found, he may have been using the money for gambling and other personal expenses instead of supporting his family. I stared at the documents in disbelief. You're saying all those times I helped him with bills, with his kids' school stuff, that money never went to them? Mark nodded solemnly. It seems that way. Amanda discovered this recently and came to me because she didn't know what to do. She didn't want to involve you at first, but given the circumstances, she thought you should know. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Lucas had been playing me all along, taking money I thought was going to help his family and blowing it on who knows what. I didn't know whether to feel angry, betrayed, or just plain stupid for not seeing it sooner. Does Amanda have proof? I asked, my voice tense. Mark nodded and pushed the folder closer to me. Take a look for yourself. I leafed through the documents. There were transfers from my account to Lucas's matching the times I'd helped him with emergencies. Then there were withdrawals from his account. Large sums going to a separate account in his name. I saw transactions from that account to online gambling sites, expensive restaurants, and even a few hotel stays. Unbelievable, I muttered, shaking my head. And Amanda knew about this? She only recently discovered the second account, Mark explained. She had suspicions for a while, but she didn't have access to his banking information until she stumbled across some bank statements he'd left out. That's when she contacted me. I sat back trying to take it all in. Does she want me to do anything? When I left Mark Dawson's office, the weight of Lucas's betrayal was overwhelming. Every piece of evidence presented by the lawyer felt like a stab in the back. He hadn't just abused my generosity. He had intentionally deceived me and Amanda, lying to both of us while squandering the money meant to support his family. I had spent years sacrificing for him, and this was how he repaid me, with lies and ingratitude. As I drove home, anger grew within me. Lucas had always been irresponsible, but this betrayal was beyond anything I could have imagined. The thought of his children, who I thought I was helping, suffering while he wasted money on gambling, luxury dining, and hotels made my blood boil. I decided he needed to face the consequences, not just for what he did to me, but for everything Amanda and the kids had endured because of him. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the documents spread out before me. Every line was a weapon, every piece of evidence, a bullet. If Lucas wanted a war, he'd found the right person to fight. But this wasn't going to be impulsive. It had to be meticulous, calculated, and definitive. First, I scanned and secured all the evidence, storing copies in multiple locations to ensure it couldn't be destroyed. Then I arranged to meet with Amanda. When we met the next day, she looked exhausted, but there was a determination in her eyes I hadn't seen before. "Michael, I'm so sorry about all of this," she began, her voice trembling. "I didn't know what Lucas was doing." "I believe you," I replied, "but we need to make a decision. Do you want to stay with him?" She hesitated before shaking her head. "I can't. He's destroyed the trust we had. There's no going back." "That's all I needed to know," I said. "Now, let's make sure he faces the consequences and understands what he's done." I spent the following weeks meticulously planning every step with Mark's help. We filed to freeze Lucas's accounts under suspicion of financial misuse. At the same time, Amanda initiated divorce proceedings. We gathered enough evidence to ensure she would get full custody of the children. But I knew Lucas wouldn't take this lying down. It didn't take long for him to show up at my door again. Furious, he pounded on the door like a madman, shouting my name. When I opened it, he tried to push his way in, but I raised my hand to stop him. "If you take one step inside, I'm calling the police," I said calmly. "You're behind this, aren't you?" he shouted. "You're trying to ruin my life." "I'm not trying to ruin anything, Lucas. You did that all on your own," I replied. "I just exposed the truth." "You think this is over?" he yelled. "I'll put an end to this, Michael. You'll regret this." "Good luck with that," I said, slamming the door in his face. He stood outside yelling for a few more minutes before storming off. I knew that was the end. A few days later, Lucas began a campaign to turn our parents against me. He went to them crying, claiming I was destroying his life and that Amanda and I were conspiring to leave him with nothing. My mother, always inclined to believe Lucas's stories, called me demanding an explanation. "Michael, how could you do this to your brother? He's suffering so much. You want to know what's happening, Mom?" "Fine," I said. "I'll show you." The next day, I went to their house with all the evidence. I laid it out piece by piece. Bank statements, receipts, and proof of his lies. My father stayed silent, but the shame was evident in his eyes. My mother, however, tried to justify it. "He was under a lot of pressure. Maybe he made mistakes, but he's your brother." "He didn't make mistakes, Mom. He chose to deceive us. He chose to lie to you, to me, to Amanda. He chose to gamble away the money meant for his family, and now he needs to face the consequences." The conversation ended with them visibly shaken, but for the first time, they didn't try to defend Lucas. Meanwhile, Amanda was gaining strength. With Lucas's accounts frozen and the evidence stacked against him, she secured full custody of the kids and control of their home. Lucas, on the other hand, was crumbling. The debts he had hidden began to surface, and creditors were unwilling to wait. He lost access to his accounts, and his reputation was in shambles. But it still wasn't enough. I needed Lucas to fully understand what it meant to manipulate and betray someone who had only ever tried to help him. So, I exposed his actions to our close friends and relatives, not out of petty revenge, but to ensure the truth was known. Lucas tried to confront me in public, but this time I was ready. "You have a nerve to face me after everything you've done?" I asked. "After stealing from your own family? Lying to all of us? What did you think would happen, Lucas? That I'd keep funding your lies?" He had no response. The people around us began to see him for who he truly was, and the network of support he had relied on for years began to crumble. Amanda, on the other hand, was rebuilding her life. She secured a stable job, enrolled her kids in a good school, and finally found peace. As for me, I learned to protect my generosity. Never again would I allow anyone to take advantage of my kindness. Lucas was left alone to face the consequences of his choices. He tried to rebuild, but with mounting debts and a ruined reputation, he became isolated, with no one to turn to. And while I finally found freedom and peace, Lucas learned the hard way that some betrayals come with a heavy price. Now on to the next story. Story 2. I couldn't believe it when my boyfriend forced me to go to the hospital for a virginity test. We had a huge fight about it, and I was so furious that I anonymously posted about it online. As expected, it sparked outrage among netizens. The top comment advised me to break up with him, saying guys like that are bound to be controlling and restrictive in the future. But honestly, Gabriel has always been good to me. Still, the comments were getting pretty harsh, so I felt compelled to defend him a bit. However, amidst all the angry responses, one comment stood out as strange. "Your boyfriend isn't Caucasian, is he?" I was surprised to see that comment because Gabriel really isn't Caucasian. Before I could respond, a flood of replies appeared below. "What's wrong with not being Caucasian? That's racist. So only white people are civilized now? Can we focus on the issue at hand without bringing race into it? Gross." As more and more people expressed their outrage, I worried that the moderators might lock the thread because of the sensitive topic. I quickly replied, "Do you know something about this? Please explain if you can. I completely respect cultural differences." I wondered if there was some cultural custom I wasn't aware of that caused this misunderstanding with Gabriel. After all, Gabriel has always treated me very well in our 2 years together. He would do all the cooking and household chores while I relaxed after work. He would even bring me a warm foot bath before bed. He kept track of my menstrual cycle, reminding me to stay warm and avoid cold drinks in the days leading up to it. If I got hurt or started bleeding, he'd be more worried than me, sternly warning me to be careful. I grew up without parents, and he practically doted on me like a daughter, so I felt guilty for bringing all this online hate upon him over one incident. I refreshed the comments a few times, but the user with a cute avatar still hadn't replied. I figured they might have muted the thread because of all the angry responses. I put my phone down and turned to look at Gabriel, who was sleeping beside me. His tan skin, the subtle snake tattoo on his neck, his chiseled features. I couldn't help but trace the lines of his face. He stirred awake at my touch but didn't seem upset. He took my hand and brought it to his lips for a soft kiss. "Get some sleep. We have an early flight tomorrow." He was taking me to meet his parents the next day. Maybe that's why I was so anxious. I could hardly sleep on the plane the next day. Still groggy, I picked up my phone again. I intended to delete my post to stop people from attacking Gabriel. As soon as I opened the app, I saw that the person had finally replied, "Is your boyfriend Tibetan?" I looked out the window at the vast, snow-capped mountains and froze. He actually was. It seems I asked the right person. We'd agreed not to bring up our fight again, so I hadn't had the chance to ask Gabriel about it. Now that I'd found someone who seemed to understand, I got excited. "Yes, he is. Is there some cultural significance?" I wasn't expecting an immediate response, but they replied quickly, "Don't go to his home." My heart skipped a beat because I was, at that moment, on a plane heading to his home. Slowly, I turned to look at Gabriel, who was busy working on his laptop. I must have looked pale. "What's wrong, babe?" he asked, taking my hand and gently squeezing it. "Nothing, just tired," I replied. He smiled, pretending to scold me. "That's what you get for staying up late. My future wife is gorgeous. No need to be nervous about meeting my parents." He adjusted my seat, tucked the blanket around me, and massaged my hand. "Don't worry. My parents are wonderful people. Get some rest." He was always so considerate and gentle with his words. I started to think that commenter must be trolling, or maybe they were just prejudiced. I'd been with Gabriel for 5 years. How could I doubt him based on one stranger's words? I nodded and snuggled into the blanket, turning onto my side. After a while, I heard him resume typing on his laptop, so I secretly opened my phone again. I wanted to confront that person. I angrily replied, "So what if I go? What's going to happen?" They seemed to have been waiting for my response and replied almost instantly, 3 years ago, my sister went and never came back." My hand trembled as I held the phone. The plane hit some turbulence, and with a clatter, my phone fell to the floor. I bent down to pick it up, still in a daze. Gabriel bent down to help, handing it back to me. I quickly turned off the still-lit screen. He noticed my odd behavior but didn't question it. Instead, he affectionately caressed my cheek and said, "What am I going to do with you? Always so restless, even when sleeping." Forcing a laugh, I replied, "Well, that's why I have you, right?" I lay back in my seat, gazing at Gabriel as he returned to his work. I really couldn't imagine such a good man doing anything to harm me. But out of curiosity, I picked up my phone once more. The comment section was buzzing. What are you implying? Speak clearly and stop with the racist nonsense. Your sister goes missing and you blame her boyfriend instead of calling the police? Really? As a Caucasian, I'm shaking in my boots here. Is this some kind of supernatural horror story? I have to admit, I'm intrigued. The other comments reminded me that my post had gone viral because of the sensitive topic. This person could just be making up fiction for attention. Feeling annoyed, I replied, well, I'm already on my way there. So scary. Whatever shall I do then? I tossed my phone aside and put on my sleep mask. After we landed, Gabriel's home wasn't actually in Lessa. We had to take several more rides before finally arriving, and by arriving, I mean we ended up at the base of a mountain. He led me on a hike up winding trails. I quickly lost track of where we were. His parents called him several times during the trek, asking why we weren't there yet. They seemed to be in a rush. At this point, I couldn't help but recall that commenter's warning. A chill ran down my spine. I wanted to run. Why you stop? Tired. Gabriel paused and turned back to smile at me. Then he crouched down. Hop on. I'll carry you. I looked around. Even if I wanted to run now, I had no idea how to get out of these complex mountain trails. I took a deep breath and climbed onto his back. I refused to believe that a man willing to carry me up a mountain trail could be truly evil. When we finally reached Gabriel's home, I thought I must have been overthinking things. I never expected to find an ancient stone fortress deep in the mountains. His parents were very kind and welcoming. They brewed me some salted butter tea and prepared lamb soup. They kept insisting that butter tea should, of course, be salted. Of course, I couldn't understand what they were saying, so Gabriel had to translate for me. After the meal, his parents suggested I take a bath, saying it was melted snow water. Exhausted from the journey, I retreated to my room to rest. I opened my phone again, intending to expose that commenter's lies. Hadn't they said I shouldn't come? Well, I came and nothing bad happened. That person had already replied to me. I thought they'd be angry, but instead, they calmly instructed, go to the top floor room and see if there's a hanging scroll painting. I was skeptical. Their directions seemed oddly specific. But since I was already here, taking a look shouldn't hurt. If there wasn't one, then great, no need to worry anymore. And if there was, as I was pondering this, I pushed open the door to the top floor room. A strong scent of incense hit me. The setting sun cast light on a hanging scroll. A hanging scroll. Bang! A gust of cold wind blew the door shut behind me. I stood frozen in place. Cold sweat broke out all over my body. My scalp tingled as goosebumps rose across my skin. The scroll was huge, over a meter long, with intricate patterns I didn't recognize. It had a distinct ethnic style, but what terrified me was that the scroll was shaped like a human figure. I managed to keep my composure enough to snap a photo and post it in the comments. As soon as I shared the photo, the comment section exploded. Holy shit! There's actually a scroll. Don't scare me, it's dark out. You two planned this, right? Why the hell is it human-shaped? Creepy as fuck. This has to be fake for views, right? Please be fake. Girl, you need to get out of there now. Something feels very wrong about this. The comments grew more and more frantic. I typed out, what is this thing? They replied immediately, a human skin thanka. What's a human skin thanka? Someone asked before I could. Simply put, it's a religious scroll painting made from human skin. As soon as I read that explanation, my legs nearly gave out. Looking at the scroll, I felt nauseous and terrified. The room was eerily silent. There was only one small window facing the scroll. The light was quickly fading. The incense scent seemed to grow stronger, as if it would swallow me up in the darkness. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like lead. I could only stare blankly at my phone. Human skin? Surely it's not what I think it is. Be careful, girl. I've heard of these. Apparently, only the skin of enlightened monks or unmarried virgins can be used. No wonder her boyfriend took her for that medical exam. I'm Tibetan and this practice was banned after 1949. They're all made with fake skin now. Don't scare the poor girl. But this is way too much of a coincidence. You really need to be careful. I couldn't stop shaking. My breathing grew rapid as panic set in. Just then, that person sent another message. Don't eat anything they give you. Don't bathe in the snow water. I nearly forgot how to breathe. My jaw trembled. Everything that had happened since last night matched exactly what they said. Either they had somehow planted hidden cameras to watch me, or they weren't lying. They were telling the truth. With trembling hands, I typed, "What if I already ate and bathed?" I had barely hit send when knock, knock, knock. A knocking sound broke the long silence, jolting my frayed nerves. Knock, knock, knock. Anna, are you in there? My heart pounded so hard it felt like it was echoing throughout the room. The knocks on the door continued, firm and rhythmic, as if the person on the other side knew exactly how to unsettle me. Anna, are you in there? Gabriel's voice sounded sweet, but at that moment, it felt different. Something about his tone sent a chill down my spine. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me, or maybe I was finally noticing something I had ignored before. Yes, I'm here, I replied, my voice trembling as I tried to sound calm. The silence that followed was even worse. No sound, no movement, just the smell of incense, which seemed to grow stronger, almost suffocating. I was just resting, I added, hoping that would make him go away. The knocking stopped, but the feeling of danger didn't. I decided I needed to get out of that room. I didn't know where to go, but I knew I couldn't stay there. I looked again at the hanging scroll on the wall. The intricate patterns seemed to move, almost pulse, as the fading evening light cast shadows across it. The human figure depicted there, or worse, made, filled me with dread. Human skin, I thought again, the words echoing in my mind like a death sentence. I grabbed my phone, my hands trembling so much I nearly dropped it. A new message had arrived. Get out now. I wanted to obey. I wanted to open the door and run, but Gabriel was outside. If all of this was true, he knew exactly what was going on. And what if he wasn't who I thought he was? What should I do? I typed, practically begging for guidance. I sent the message, but no response came immediately. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate, as if someone was walking to confirm I was still in the room. I held my breath, trying to stay quiet, but the smell of incense seemed to invade my senses, making it harder and harder to breathe. A notification. The vibration of the phone almost made me scream. I looked at the screen. In the kitchen, there's a door leading outside. Take water, but don't trust anything else. Don't tell anyone you're leaving. I stood up, my legs feeling like lead. Every step toward the door was a challenge. I opened it slowly, trying not to make a sound. The hallway was empty. For a moment, I thought about going back to the room, but I knew hesitation wasn't an option. I turned on the flashlight on my phone and made my way toward the stairs. The house was dark, lit only by the faint glow of candles along the walls. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of the wooden floor beneath my feet. When I reached the kitchen, a shiver ran down my spine. It was rustic, with old furniture and pots hanging from hooks. In the corner, I saw the door mentioned in the message, almost hidden in the shadows. I started toward it, but before I could reach it, I heard voices. I couldn't understand everything they were saying, but I recognized Gabriel's voice. He was talking to someone, probably his parents. I crouched behind the counter, trying to listen. Everything's ready. It won't take long, he said with a calmness that chilled me to the bone. Ready for what? Who were they talking about? My body froze as my mind raced. It's for the good of everyone, replied a deeper voice, which I assumed was his father. We've waited long enough. My heart sank. I needed to get out of there immediately. My hands were so sweaty I almost dropped my phone. I took a deep breath and kept moving toward the kitchen door. Just as my hand touched the handle, I heard footsteps approaching. I dropped to the floor, hiding behind a table. Gabriel entered the kitchen, muttering something to himself. He seemed to be carrying something, but I couldn't see what. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. When he opened the kitchen door and stepped outside, I seized the moment. As soon as he was gone, I ran in the opposite direction. At the end of the hallway, I found another door. It looked like a secondary exit. I turned the handle and stepped into the cold night air. The smell of incense faded behind me, but the darkness surrounding me was almost total. Only the sound of the wind accompanied me as I ran aimlessly. I didn't know if I was heading in the right direction, but I had to get away from that house. My phone vibrated again. Don't trust anyone. He will follow you. The message made me stumble, nearly falling. The ground was uneven, filled with rocks and roots. I looked back, but I didn't see anything. Still, I felt like I was being watched. I kept running, my breath ragged and the icy air burning my throat. After what felt like forever, I saw a light in the distance. A small cabin or maybe an abandoned shed. I ran toward it, praying for help. When I reached it, the door was ajar. I slipped inside and closed it behind me. The interior was tiny, with a single chair and a dust-covered table. Trembling, I grabbed my phone and typed another message. I'm out of the house, but I think he's coming. What do I do now? The response came almost instantly. Don't let him find you. If he does, don't trust what he says. This is all a ritual, and you are the final piece. My legs nearly gave out. A ritual. That word spun in my mind as my body trembled uncontrollably. Then, I heard footsteps outside. The handle of the door began to turn slowly. Anna? It's me, Gabriel. Are you okay? Are you in there? I backed away, pressing myself against the wall. Tears streamed down my face. He knocked again, his voice gentle but insistent. Please open the door. It's not safe out here. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the phone. He continued, now with a more impatient tone. Anna, don't make this harder than it has to be. In that moment, I realized the man on the other side of the door was not the Gabriel I thought I knew. And if he came in, I knew I would never leave. The sound of the doorknob turning slowly pulled me back to reality. Gabriel was outside, and I knew I had to act fast. My hands were still trembling, but I gripped my phone tightly and tried to think. He knocked again, harder this time, his voice firm but laced with a sweetness that now felt completely fake. Anna, please open the door. I don't want you to get hurt. Let's talk. Okay? I talked to myself internally. No, I can't open it. If I open this door, it's all over. My only way out was to wait for the right moment. There was a small window at the back of the cabin that I hoped he didn't know about. I held my breath and moved slowly toward it. It was narrow, but it looked like I could fit through. As he kept knocking and talking, I used the noise to mask the sound of me pushing the window open. It creaked slightly and I froze, hoping he hadn't heard. When I realized he was still distracted, I managed to open it wide enough to squeeze through. I glanced outside, total darkness, but a dense forest awaited me. It was my only chance. Carefully, I climbed onto the ledge and forced myself out through the opening, feeling the cold night air sting my skin. As soon as my feet hit the ground, I started running without looking back. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I needed to get as far away as possible. The tall trees cast eerie shadows, and the sound of dry leaves crunching under my feet seemed deafening. The icy air burned my lungs, but I couldn't stop. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Gabriel had realized I was gone. He was yelling my name, his voice now desperate and angry. I picked up my pace, weaving through the trees, trying to stay out of sight. The footsteps grew closer, and my heart pounded harder. Then I saw it, lights in the distance. A road? A house? It didn't matter. I had a destination. Using every ounce of strength, I ran toward the light. Finally, the forest opened up to a narrow road. There were no cars, but I saw a small, illuminated farmhouse. I banged on the door, screaming for help. An older man opened it, looking confused. But before he could ask anything, I rushed inside and slammed the door shut. Please help me. Someone's after me. He wants to hurt me. The man looked bewildered but nodded. He locked the door and reached for the phone to call the police. Outside, I could hear Gabriel shouting again, but he eventually gave up, realizing he couldn't get in. My body collapsed from exhaustion as I waited for the police to arrive. When they got there, I told them everything that had happened, but I left out the part about the ritual and the scroll. I didn't know how to explain it without sounding crazy. However, I showed them the video I had secretly recorded on my phone. It captured parts of the conversation in the kitchen and the scroll itself. They looked confused but promised to investigate. I wasn't sure they believed me, but for now I was safe. After escaping, I thanked the anonymous person who had helped me. I messaged them saying I was alive and out of danger and asked how they knew so much. The reply came quickly, "We need to talk. I can't explain everything here. Let's meet." I hesitated. I was afraid it might be another trap, but something inside me told me they were telling the truth. We arranged to meet at a busy cafe. When I arrived, I saw a man sitting alone, nervously glancing around. He looked exhausted, like someone who had been carrying a heavy burden for years. "Are you the one who messaged me?" I asked as I sat across from him. He nodded but didn't meet my eyes. "Yes, my name is Michael. I knew what was happening to you because I used to be part of it." My blood ran cold. Part of it? Part of what? The rituals. He took a deep breath and finally looked at me. "Yes, I was part of that group. It's not just a cult. It's a closed, organized circle made up of people no one would ever suspect. They have connections, influence, and dark secrets. My family was involved for generations, and I was raised to believe it was normal." I felt my stomach turn. "And you participated? You did this to other people?" He lowered his head. "I never laid a hand on anyone, but I knew what was happening. I was there. I helped organize, lure people in, until they took my sister. She was used as the final piece in one of their rituals. After that, I was never the same. I left, but I couldn't report them. They have eyes everywhere. If I tried, I'd be next." My anger boiled over. "So you stayed silent while more people disappeared? You knew what they were doing and did nothing?" "I couldn't. They would destroy me. I've already lost everything. My family, my life. All I can do is warn people anonymously." I stood up, furious. "But I can. I have proof. I recorded everything and I'm going to report them. I don't care what happens." He looked terrified. "If you do that, they'll come after you. They'll try to silence you." "Let them try," I said, determined. "They've done enough." I went to the police with all the evidence I had, the videos, the audio, and my testimony. The investigators were shocked to discover that the group was responsible for numerous unsolved disappearances. No one suspected them because they were influential, well-respected members of society. But the evidence was undeniable, and a full-scale operation was launched to take them down. Several members were arrested, including Gabriel's parents. The ritual site, the scroll, and even remains of past victims were uncovered in a thorough investigation. The story shocked the nation. The group was identified as being behind dozens of disappearances over the years, but finally, their reign of terror had come to an end. As for me, I tried to move on with my life, knowing that I would never be the same. Even though I had survived, the scars of what I had been through would always remain. But one thing gave me comfort. I had done the right thing. I had put an end to their cycle, and now no one else would fall victim to their horrors. Now on to the next story. Story 3. It all started a few months after my Aunt Lydia passed away. I'm Jake, 32 years old, and for most of my life, I've kept to myself. I'm not the loudest voice in the room. I've never liked drama. I work in cybersecurity, which means I spend more time with code than people, and I'm okay with that. But life has this way of dragging you into the mud, no matter how clean you try to live. And sometimes that mud has your last name. Aunt Lydia wasn't just rich. She was clever, private, and tough as nails. She never married, never had kids, and for as long as I can remember, she always treated me like I was her own. When my mom, Diane, would guilt-trip her about favoritism, Lydia would just say, "Jake listens, Jake cares, the rest of you take." She wasn't wrong. Lydia had this old colonial-style house on the edge of town. 2 stories, ivy-covered, wraparound porch, hardwood, everything. It sat on 3 acres of land, gated, quiet, beautiful. She called it her sanctuary. My brother Ryan used to joke that he'd flip it for $500,000 one day, and Lydia would just roll her eyes and change the subject. Ryan was loud, brash, and always looking for the easy route to big money. If there was a shortcut, he'd find it. If there was a handout, he'd take it. And if there was someone to manipulate, especially family, he had no shame. Lydia passed away peacefully in her sleep at 81. The funeral was small. Just a handful of close friends, a couple of extended family members, and of course my mother and brother. Ryan barely held it together during the reading of the will. He fidgeted like a kid at the DMV, whispering to Mom every 2 minutes. He was certain he was about to become a millionaire. Instead, Lydia left everything to me. Not just the house. Her entire estate, every stock, every bond, every asset. Her lawyer, Mr. Whitmore, read it all out loud. Ryan's jaw unhinged. My mom, well, she didn't even try to hide her fury. "This has to be a mistake," she said, standing up like it was a PDA meeting and not a legal proceeding. Lydia wouldn't do that to her own family. Mr. Whitmore calmly adjusted his glasses. "She did, and she was quite thorough. This isn't something that can be contested." Ryan muttered something under his breath, and I just sat there stunned. I hadn't expected to be left with all of it. I thought maybe she'd split things between the 3 of us or even donate most of it. But after everything, she'd trusted me. The thing is, I knew my family well. I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. So, instead of moving into the house and celebrating, I did something else. I created an irrevocable trust. The house, the investments, everything tucked neatly inside a legal fortress. I still lived in the house, sure, but on paper I didn't own it. The trust did, and that trust had clear instructions, including who would take over if anything happened to me. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. The first few weeks, Mom and Ryan were quiet. Too quiet. I got a couple of passive-aggressive texts. Things like, "Hope you're enjoying the money you didn't earn." And Lydia must have really lost her mind at the end. I ignored them. I figured they'd get bored and move on. Then I started noticing cars idling outside the gate. Once I came home and saw Ryan standing just outside the property line, hands in his pockets, staring at the house like he was trying to memorize every inch of it. I didn't confront him. I just watched from the upstairs window, heart thudding, already making a mental list of things I'd need to tighten. Surveillance footage, insurance, locks. But then it got bolder. Mom showed up one Sunday with Ryan, holding a manila envelope and a smug little smile. "We've had the deed transferred," she said, like she was telling me the casserole was in the oven. "You're out by Monday." I blinked. "You what?" Ryan stepped forward, grinning like a man who just won a poker game with a royal flush. "It's done. The deed is in my name now." "Sorry, bro." I didn't even get mad. I just leaned against the porch post, crossed my arms, and gave them a little smirk. "You really think I didn't plan for this?" They looked at each other, confused. My mom's smile faltered for a split second. "Enjoy your day," I said, walking back inside and locking the door behind me. The next 48 hours were oddly calm. Too calm. I went about my routine, made coffee, worked from home, even took the dog for a walk down the wooded path behind the property. But I could feel the tension building like a storm cloud hanging just out of reach. Then on Wednesday morning, I looked out the window and saw the moving truck. Ryan stepped out wearing sunglasses, his phone to his ear, probably live streaming his victory. My mom followed behind him with a tote bag, looking like she was walking into a country club. And behind them, 2 guys from the moving company were lifting boxes labeled Mom's China and Ryan's office. I stayed on the porch, calm as ever, sipping coffee. And then they saw him, Mr. Whitmore in his pressed gray suit, holding a black leather folder, standing beside me like the angel of paperwork. Ryan stopped in his tracks. His smile vanished. My mom's mouth opened, then closed again like a goldfish. The 2 movers looked between us, unsure whether to keep going or drop everything and run. "You're trespassing," Mr. Whitmore said, matter of fact. And this house is protected under an irrevocable trust. That trust cannot be modified, sold, or transferred by anyone but the trustee. That's Jake. You have no legal claim. And if you attempt to enter the premises, we'll proceed with criminal charges for fraud and attempted theft. Ryan turned red. Not angry red. Embarrassed red, like he just walked into a job interview with toilet paper stuck to his shoe. Mom looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something behind her eyes that wasn't contempt. It was fear. And that's when something in me shifted. Not because they were being put in their place, but because I realized just how far they'd go. This wasn't over. They weren't going to back down. They were going to try again. And next time, it might not be with fake deeds and moving trucks. It might be worse. And I was ready. But I hadn't told them yet, because I had one more surprise waiting. One more piece of paper in that folder. And when they saw what it was, they'd know just how badly they had underestimated me. Mr. Whitmore didn't even need to raise his voice. That man had the quiet authority of a judge on verdict day. He calmly opened the folder, revealing a stack of papers, each one neatly labeled with sticky notes and tabs. My mom leaned in as if she could read them from 10 feet away. Ryan stepped forward again, but Whitmore simply held up one hand. "Don't," he said. "You've already made one legal mistake this week." Ryan looked like a balloon that had been overinflated with hot air and then pinched at the neck. His chest puffed out, fists clenched at his sides, but no words came. He glanced at Mom, waiting for her to step in like she always did, but even she was quiet now. She was staring at the folder like it had fangs. I didn't say anything either. I just sat down in one of the porch chairs and watched the scene unfold, coffee in hand, heart finally slowing. Then Whitmore flipped to a specific page and read aloud. "This house and the surrounding property, including the private road and the gate, are not in Jake's name. They are owned by the Lydia Everhart Legacy Trust, which was established 3 weeks after Lydia's passing. Jake is the sole trustee with no power to liquidate or transfer any part of the trust outside its guidelines. The trust is irrevocable and was filed with the county and state. Any attempts to modify ownership, including forgery, are prosecutable." He looked up. "That includes the fake deed transfer you filed, Mr. Ryan." The silence was thick. Even the movers, who had just unloaded a box labeled Ryan's Man Cave, stopped and slowly placed it back into the truck. One of them muttered something like, "Man, I ain't paid enough for this," and walked around to the driver's side. Mom finally broke the silence. "You're lying. This is some trick. Lydia wouldn't. She'd never lock the house like that. She trusted family." "Lydia," Whitmore replied with the calmness of a man who'd read hundreds of wills, "trusted Jake. And after reviewing her journals and her formal letter of intent, which I also have in this folder, she made it clear that she foresaw this exact situation." He turned to me, then back to them. "She didn't just predict this. She planned for it." Ryan's voice cracked. "That's not fair. We're her family. I deserve something." And there it was, the word that always showed its face sooner or later with Ryan. Deserve. As if existence alone was enough to earn him a 6-bedroom estate and $250,000 in stocks. As if decades of disrespect and manipulation could be wiped away with a last name. "You deserve jail time for filing forged documents," Whitmore said, flipping to another page. "But Jake has chosen not to pursue criminal charges yet. That can change." I saw Ryan's jaw work like he wanted to say something clever, but the words never landed. He turned to Mom, expecting her to jump in with righteous fury, but she was already on her phone, scrolling furiously, trying to find something to prove this wasn't real, something to undo it. But she wasn't going to find it. I stood up slowly, stepped down the porch and walked toward them. Calm, measured. I was done playing defense. "I know what you tried to do," I said, my voice quieter than I expected, but firm. "And I know you think this house is some kind of prize to be claimed, but it's not a trophy. It's not a flipping opportunity. This place mattered to Lydia. And whether you believe it or not, she didn't want it ending up in your hands." Ryan sneered. "Why? Because I wouldn't turn it into a shrine like you?" Lydia didn't care about all this. She had money sitting around for years. She didn't even enjoy it. She enjoyed the quiet, I said, my voice rising slightly. She enjoyed not having to deal with leeches. She enjoyed being left alone. And she left it to me because she knew I'd protect it. He scoffed. So what? Now you're the gatekeeper of the family legacy. No, I said. I'm the gatekeeper of her legacy. And you're not family. Not the kind that matters. Something in Ryan's face twitched. A vein pulsed near his temple, and for a moment I thought he might lunge. But instead he shook his head, laughed bitterly, and turned away. Mom finally spoke again, her voice like cold steel. You'll regret this, Jake. You think you're above us now, but you're not. Blood doesn't forget. One day you'll need help. One day you'll be alone. I nodded slowly. Maybe. But I'd rather be alone than surrounded by people waiting to stab me the second my back's turned. She didn't reply. She just walked back to the car, Ryan trailing behind her like a scolded child. The movers didn't say a word. They repacked the 2 boxes they'd unloaded, shrugged at me, and drove off without another glance. But the peace didn't last long. That night, my phone started blowing up. Emails, messages, a letter sent by courier, a voicemail from someone claiming to be an estate reassignment officer, which was nonsense. It became clear that they weren't done. They were regrouping. And worse, I found out Ryan had tried to talk to someone at the county registrar's office, trying to explain how the trust had been formed under duress and how he, as the rightful heir, needed access to Lydia's full portfolio. They were getting desperate, and desperation can be dangerous. I started reviewing the security footage more often. I had cameras installed at every corner of the property with cloud backups. I notified the trust's attorney and asked Whitmore to remain on call for the foreseeable future. But more than anything, I began preparing for what I knew was coming. The next move. Because people like Ryan and my mother don't take no as a final answer. They take it as a challenge. And sure enough, 3 nights later, just past 11 p.m., I heard something on the front porch. A soft thump, like a boot hitting wood. I turned off the TV and stood, heart suddenly pounding again. But I didn't reach for the light. I just picked up my phone, pulled up the security app, and tapped the live feed. And there they were. Mom, Ryan, and a third guy I didn't recognize, standing just outside the door. And Ryan was holding something in his hand. Something metal. My thumb hovered over the screen. Because this time they weren't trying to lie. They were trying to break in. I didn't move right away. Just stood there in the dark, heart hammering in my ears, watching them on the screen. Ryan was pacing like a dog at the edge of a fence, holding what looked like a crowbar or maybe a tire iron. Mom stood behind him, arms folded tight, her mouth moving rapidly, clearly giving orders like this was some kind of tactical operation and not a felony. The third guy, he gave me a chill I couldn't explain. He was big, broad shoulders, heavy-set, and unlike Ryan, he didn't look nervous, just calm, too calm. He wore a hoodie, hood up, and he wasn't looking at the house. He was looking directly at the security camera like he knew where it was. I backed away from the screen and reached for my side table. Inside was the small safe I kept for situations like this. Nothing too dramatic, just a legal firearm I was licensed to carry and a taser. I didn't want to escalate anything, but I wasn't stupid either. I'd lived in Lydia's house for almost 8 months now, and in all that time, I'd never once felt unsafe. Not until tonight. As I quietly moved toward the front door, I tapped the security alert that I had set up with the county sheriff's office just in case. One push and the system would automatically ping local dispatch with GPS coordinates and video feed access. I never thought I'd actually use it, but here we were. Back on the screen, I saw Ryan kneel by the front door and start fiddling with something. Probably the lock. He wasn't great with tools, but I knew he had friends who were. Or maybe this third guy was the one who knew his way around a deadbolt. I hesitated not because I was afraid, but because I was angry. Angry that they would stoop this low. Angry that after everything, after the will, the trust, the forged deed, the moving truck, they were still trying to force their way into something that wasn't theirs. Angry that they couldn't accept no for an answer. I opened the door just a crack, enough to let the motion sensor light kick on, and bathed the porch in that cold fluorescent glow. All three of them froze. Ryan scrambled to stand, the tool in his hand clattering to the floor. Mom took a step back, her face drained of color, and the big guy. He didn't flinch, but I saw his eyes narrow just slightly. I didn't say anything at first, just stood there, letting the silence stretch long and heavy. Then calmly, I said, "You've got 5 seconds to get off my porch before the police arrive." Ryan's voice cracked. "You wouldn't call the cops on your own brother." "I didn't," I said. "I called them on 3 trespassers. Doesn't matter what your names are." Mom tried to speak, but I cut her off. "You've already tried lying. You've tried stealing. You even tried faking legal documents. And now you're breaking and entering with a guy who looks like he gets paid in cash and silence. You're not family anymore. You're a threat." "I raised you," she snapped, stepping forward. "You ungrateful little." "I raised myself," I said louder now. "You were never there. Lydia was. And now you're mad that she saw through you." Behind them, I could hear sirens in the distance. Faint but getting closer. The third guy, the stranger, turned to Ryan and muttered something. Probably something like, "We need to go." But Ryan wasn't leaving. He was shaking. Not with fear. He was shaking with rage. "You think you're better than us now?" he shouted. "With your stupid little papers and your security system and your holier-than-thou attitude." I didn't respond. I just stared at him, calm, silent, letting him unravel. "You don't deserve this place," he yelled. "You don't deserve any of it. You're a boring, uptight little freak who hid behind Aunt Lydia because you couldn't make it in the real world." He stepped forward again, and for a moment, I saw it. That flash in his eyes, that line he was thinking about crossing. But then the blue and red lights hit the treetops, then the driveway, then the porch, and just like that, everything changed. The third guy backed away instantly, hands up. Smart. The cruisers screeched to a halt, doors flying open. 2 deputies stepped out, guns low but drawn, barking commands. Mom raised her hands. Ryan froze. I didn't say a word. I just stepped out of the doorway, hands visible, and pointed at the dropped crowbar on the porch. "That's theirs," I said. "So is the attempted break-in." The officers moved fast. Within a minute, Ryan was cuffed and sitting on the edge of the porch, still yelling about how this was a family misunderstanding. Mom kept saying it was all a mistake and that they just came to talk. The third guy didn't say a word, just let himself be led to the car, calm as ever. But here's the thing. The real surprise wasn't the police. It wasn't even the trust. It was the folder Mr. Whitmore left on the coffee table that morning just in case. Because inside that folder was a recording Lydia made 6 months before she died. Her voice, her words, her final message to me and to them. And tomorrow morning, I plan to play it for everyone in court. The next morning, I showed up at the courthouse alone, dressed in a simple black jacket and slacks, folder in hand. I didn't need a lawyer today. This wasn't a trial. It was a preliminary hearing to determine whether criminal charges for attempted fraud, trespassing, and attempted unlawful entry would proceed to formal prosecution. But it was also my moment, my one shot to make everything plain, to show everyone exactly what had happened. No denials, no gaslighting, just facts. Ryan and my mother arrived 15 minutes late. Ryan was in a wrinkled button-up, trying to look put together but failing miserably. Mom wore a beige blazer over a tight-fitting dress that might have passed for respectable if her face didn't look like she'd spent the night grinding her teeth into dust. Their lawyer, a smug, fast-talking type named Preston, greeted the clerk with a smile, then turned to me with a nod like we were co-workers or old neighbors. "Jake," he said, extending his hand. "Glad we could settle this like family today." I didn't shake it, just looked at him and said, "You might want to hear what's in the folder before you finish that sentence." He laughed politely and went to sit with them at the table. I took a seat near the front row, and when Judge Hamilton entered, everyone stood. He was an older man with a slow, commanding presence. The kind of judge you couldn't charm, outtalk, or intimidate. He'd seen everything, and he wasn't impressed by theatrics. After the bailiff read the charges and the usual formalities were out of the way, Judge Hamilton leaned back in his chair and looked down at the documents in front of him. So, we have an allegation of attempted fraudulent property transfer, trespassing, and unlawful entry, he said. Counselor, your clients claim this was a misunderstanding. Is that correct? Preston stood up, buttoned his jacket, and began speaking with the kind of polished ease that only comes from 1,000 courtroom performances. Yes, Your Honor. At the heart of this matter is a family disagreement exacerbated by grief and confusion over an estate. My clients believe they were entitled to access the property in question and had been led to believe that the transfer was, if not finalized, then certainly underway. It was at most a miscommunication. The judge raised one eyebrow. A miscommunication involving a crowbar? Preston didn't flinch. My client, Mr. Ryan Callahan, acknowledges that he brought a tool with him, but maintains it was for accessing a shed on the property he believed was his, not for any unlawful entry into the home. Judge Hamilton glanced down at the file again. And the attempt to file a forged deed transfer with the registrar's office? Preston smiled, just barely. Again, Your Honor, that filing was made in the sincere belief that my client was executing a document he had a right to pursue. If there was an error, it was not one made with malicious intent. I finally stood. Your Honor, I said, voice clear and calm. May I submit a piece of evidence? Judge Hamilton gestured for me to approach. I handed the clerk the folder Mr. Whitmore had left me, the one with the audio file Lydia recorded months before her death. Along with it, I submitted a written transcript signed by Lydia, notarized, and included in the trust paperwork that was already on record. The clerk placed a small speaker on the bench and Hamilton looked over the paperwork before nodding. We'll allow it. I took my seat again as the courtroom fell silent. And then Lydia's voice filled the room. Jake, if you're hearing this, then it means my instincts were right. I hope they weren't, but I know better. Your mother and your brother, they've always seen people as tools, not as family. You were the only one who never asked me for anything. That's why you're the one I trusted. She took a slow breath, and for a moment the room felt like she was there again, sitting by the window in her reading chair, sunlight warming her hands, always sharp as a tack. I want the house to be yours, but I know they'll try to take it. That's why I put it all in the trust, because they'll try tricks, lies, maybe even threats. You need to protect yourself, Jake. You need to stand your ground. And if they come for you, play this. Let them hear me say it plain. Her voice hardened. Ryan, Diane, if you're hearing this, you need to understand something. You were never entitled to my money. You were never owed this house. You had years to treat me with respect, with kindness, with decency. You chose manipulation, lies, and distance. This estate is not for you. It's not for flipping or selling. It's not a shortcut. It's a gift for Jake. She paused. And if you can't accept that, then you deserve nothing. The recording ended. The silence afterward was deafening. Preston shifted uncomfortably. Mom looked pale, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white. Ryan just sat there motionless, eyes locked on the table in front of him. Judge Hamilton looked down at the transcript again, then slowly removed his glasses and set them on the bench. I've reviewed the trust documents, he said. I've seen the footage of the attempted break-in, and now I've heard the decedent's own words. This was not a miscommunication. This was a deliberate, sustained attempt to defraud the rightful trustee of his property. And when that failed, you attempted to intimidate and illegally enter the home. He leaned forward, voice firm. Mr. Callahan, you are hereby ordered to cease any and all contact with Mr. Jake Callahan. Effective immediately. A restraining order will be filed. Mrs. Callahan, the same applies to you. Mom opened her mouth, but he raised his hand. You are lucky criminal charges haven't been formally pressed yet. If you attempt any further contact, that luck will run out. Then he turned to me. Mr. Callahan, you've handled yourself with remarkable restraint. I strongly advise you to maintain the trust as your aunt intended and to remain vigilant. You've done well. I nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. And just like that, it was over. I walked out of the courthouse alone, the morning sun warm on my face, and I felt lighter than I had in months. No shouting, No final confrontation. No need to scream or slam doors. Just the truth, cold, clear, and documented. Lydia had planned for everything, and I had followed her playbook to the letter. Back at the house, I sat on the porch and stared out at the trees, breathing in the silence. The air felt cleaner somehow, sharper, like something had been purged. I knew Ryan and Mom wouldn't give up completely. People like that rarely do. But now they'd have to operate from the shadows, and I had the law on my side. The cameras stayed up. The locks were reinforced, and Mr. Whitmore remained on retainer. A week later, I got a letter from Ryan's lawyer. Not Preston. Someone new. It was a settlement offer, a final attempt to amicably part ways if I gave them a small portion of the estate. Enough for Ryan to start over and for Mom to secure her retirement. I didn't even respond. Some letters deserved to stay unopened. Instead, I called a contractor and started work on renovating Lydia's library into a studio space. I planned to digitize all her journals, catalog her books, and maybe even start writing myself. Stories, memoirs, who knows? The house didn't just feel like mine now. It was mine. Not because I held the title, but because I earned it by fighting for it, by honoring Lydia's trust, and by refusing to let greed rewrite history. One evening, as I sat on the porch with a mug of coffee, I found one of her old journals tucked behind a shelf. Inside was a note written in her elegant, looping script. "You may be quiet, Jake, but in the end, you're the only one who listened. That's why you'll outlast them. You always were the legacy I wanted." I smiled for the first time in a long time. Not out of pride, not out of victory, but because I knew she was right. Now on to the next story. Story 4. My name's Greg. I'm 42 and I've been raising my stepdaughter, Leia, since she was 6. Her mom, Rachel, and I met when Leia was just a kindergartner with a mess of curls and a loud, curious voice. I fell for both of them, to be honest. Rachel was this magnetic, driven woman who made everything feel 10 degrees warmer just by being in the room. Leia was quiet at first, cautious around me, testing me with little things. Would I remember to pick her up from ballet? Would I come to her school play even if she only had one line? I always did. Every time when Rachel and I got married, I made a promise to both of them. I told Leia directly, kneeling down to her eye level at the wedding reception, "You don't have to call me Dad, but I'll always treat you like my daughter." I meant it then, and I kept meaning it every day after. Through every tantrum, every science fair, every tear-filled sleepover pickup, I was there. And when Rachel got sick for a while, a bad pneumonia that knocked her out for weeks, I was the one helping with homework, making lunches, and brushing Leia's hair when she begged me not to tug. I learned to braid for her. Even when she rolled her eyes and called me Greg, like I was the janitor, I kept showing up. I knew being a step-parent came with emotional minefields, and I tried to walk carefully. But things started shifting when Leia turned 15. It was subtle at first. More sarcasm, a colder tone. Rachel brushed it off as normal teen behavior. "She's testing boundaries," she said. "It's not about you." I tried to believe her, but then came the backhanded remarks at dinner and the way Leia would barely acknowledge me in public. Once at the mall, I waved at her and her friends from across the food court. Nothing embarrassing, just a quick hand raise, and she turned away like I was invisible. Later that night, she said, "Can you not do that? It's weird when you pretend we're related." That one stung. Still, I let it go. Teens say cruel things. I reminded myself, hormones, stress, peer pressure. But the cracks deepened. At her junior year parent-teacher conference, Rachel had to work late, so I went alone. The teacher, Mrs. Morales, shook my hand and smiled politely but said, "Oh, I didn't realize you were Leia's father. I thought her dad lived out of state." When I explained that I was her stepfather and had raised her for over a decade, she looked surprised. "She only ever talks about her real dad," she said quietly, as if realizing she'd said something out loud she shouldn't have. That night, I sat in my car for a long time before going home. I wasn't angry, not yet, but I felt hollow. I had been there for everything. Her real dad, Dan, had barely sent cards. He popped in once every few years with a cheap souvenir and an over-the-top smile like some sitcom character from a rerun. But I was the one paying for braces. I was the one sitting up during her fevers. I was the one clapping at her recital even when she danced like a baby giraffe. Still, I said nothing. I told Rachel about the meeting but left out the part about Mrs. Morales's comment. I figured it would just stir the pot. Maybe Leia was just going through a phase, trying to figure out her identity. But then came senior year, prom, and the fight. It was a Thursday night. Rachel was out of town for a conference and I'd picked Leia up from school because her car had stalled again. She was quiet during the ride, scrolling on her phone, barely grunting when I asked about her day. Then, out of nowhere, she asked if I could give her a few hundred for a custom prom dress. Sure, I said cautiously. But let's talk about it with your mom when she gets back, just to make sure we're not blowing the whole clothing budget. That's when she snapped. Oh my God. Why do you always have to act like you're in charge? She snapped. You're not my dad. You're just my mom's husband. That's all. You don't get to decide anything. I pulled over. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked at her, really looked at her and asked, "Is that how you see me?" After everything, she crossed her arms and looked out the window. You're not my real family. You never were. The car was dead silent for the rest of the ride. She didn't apologize later. In fact, she acted like nothing had happened that weekend. She even asked again about the money. I said no calmly, and she rolled her eyes and muttered something about how real dads don't act like accountants. That was the moment I started to pull back, not out of spite but out of self-respect. I stopped initiating. No more check-ins. No more emotional labor. I stopped reminding her about college deadlines, left the FAFSA forms on the kitchen counter untouched, and watched from a distance as she moved through the final months of high school with an air of smug independence. Rachel noticed and asked if something had happened. I told her the truth about the ride home, about what Leia had said. She was upset but tried to smooth it over like she always did. She's a teenager, she said softly. She doesn't mean it, but she did. When the college acceptance letter came, her top choice, a prestigious private university she'd been dreaming about for years, Rachel was beaming. Leia walked into the kitchen with the envelope like she was holding a golden ticket, waving it around with a triumphant grin. I sat at the table, coffee in hand, watching her. She plopped it in front of me. Guess who's going to St. Augustine University? She said with that smugness in full force. I picked up the envelope, glanced at the seal, then I handed it back. Congrats, I said, nodding. I'm sure your real dad will be thrilled to handle the tuition. The smirk dropped from her face like someone had yanked a rug out from under her. What? She said, laughing nervously. You're kidding, right? I didn't answer. I stood up, took my coffee, and left the room. That was 3 days ago, and since then, everything's been unraveling. Leia didn't say anything the rest of that day, but the silence in the house wasn't peaceful. It was dense like walking through fog. Rachel noticed it immediately when she got home. I could tell from the way her heels stopped clicking halfway into the kitchen. She looked from me to Leia, who was curled on the couch with her arms crossed and eyes glassy from whatever fake crime show she was pretending to watch. Rachel turned back to me with that familiar question loaded behind her eyes. What happened now? I didn't speak first. Leia did. I got into St. Augustine, she said, her voice hollow. That's amazing. Rachel smiled, stepping forward. And Greg said he's not paying for it, she added, barely above a whisper. Rachel turned toward me slowly, brows furrowed. Greg. I stayed calm, kept my hands on the kitchen island. She told me I'm not her real dad, that I don't get to make decisions, so I'm respecting that. Leia flinched. Rachel's mouth opened like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out at first. Sweetheart, she finally said, shifting toward Leia. You said that it was just a thing, Leia snapped. I was mad. People say stuff when they're mad. I looked at her, not angry, just tired. You didn't say it once, Leia. You've been making that point for years. You've corrected teachers, ignored Father's Day, frozen me out of school events. You wanted me out of that role, so I stepped out. Rachel stood there caught between us, hands clasped tightly like she could physically hold the piece together. "We can talk about this," she said quickly. "Greg will figure it out. We'll apply for aid. Maybe defer a year if we have to." "No," I said gently. "Rachel, I love you, but this isn't about paperwork. It's about 15 years of trying to be a father to someone who decided I was disposable the moment she could draw a line between biology and parenthood." Leia stood up fast. "So that's it? You're just going to let me fall because I hurt your feelings?" I didn't rise to the bait. "You didn't hurt my feelings, Leia. You burned the bridge and assumed I'd still drive across it." She scoffed. "Well, Dan says he'll help." Dan, her biological dad, the guy who moved to Arizona when she was 8 and reappeared once every couple of Christmases with stories about how hard it was to book flights. Dan, who hadn't sent a single dime during her entire childhood unless we chased him through court. I didn't respond to that. I didn't need to. Rachel did. "Oh, Dan says he'll help?" she said sharply, spinning to face her daughter. "That man couldn't pay for your birthday cake, Leia, let alone $60,000 a year. You think he's suddenly going to cover tuition just because you started calling him Dad again on Instagram?" Leia blinked, thrown off. "He said he'd figure it out." Rachel laughed bitterly. "He also said he'd be there for your 10th birthday. Remember that? You sat on the steps for 4 hours in a dress you hated waiting for a man who didn't call. But sure, he'll figure it out." I'd never heard Rachel snap at Leia like that before, and I think Leia hadn't either. There was no screaming after that, just silence again, this time sharper. Leia stormed off to her room and Rachel sat at the kitchen table with her head in her hands. "Greg," she said quietly, "you've done everything for her. I see it. I always have. But she's too blind to realize it until the floor's gone." "I'm not trying to punish her," I said. "I know," Rachel replied. "But maybe this is what it takes for her to finally learn what a parent is." That night, Rachel knocked on Leia's door. They talked for hours. I didn't listen in. I just sat on the porch watching the neighbor's dog chase shadows under the streetlight. I didn't feel vindicated, just numb. The next day, I got a text from Dan. It was the first time he'd contacted me directly in years. "Heard you're trying to dump college on me. Not cool, man. She's your responsibility, too." I stared at the message for a solid minute, then typed back. "No, she made it clear I never was." He didn't respond, but the fallout was just beginning. By Sunday morning, Leia had called the admissions office to ask about deferring. They told her tuition deposits were due in 2 weeks. She cried in her room for most of the day. When Rachel offered to help co-sign a loan, Leia asked if I'd change my mind. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. I said, "I want to see if you can take accountability first." She didn't answer, just turned away. That night, I overheard her on the phone with a friend. "He just flipped out of nowhere," she said. "Like he's some wounded hero. Whatever. It's not like he was ever my real dad." That was the line. That was the last brick she pulled from the wall. The next morning, I called my accountant. I'd set aside a generous fund for college years ago under my name with Leia as the beneficiary. I told him to remove her. He paused on the phone. "Are you sure?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes." As I walked back into the house, I saw Leia at the table checking the university portal. Her smile returned for a moment, then faded just as fast because the screen read, "Financial documentation not confirmed." She turned toward me slowly, confusion on her face. "Did you?" I didn't answer. I just sipped my coffee and said, "Ask your real dad." Leia didn't speak. She just stared at me like I was suddenly a stranger in her own house. The kind of look people give when the scaffolding of their world starts to crack and they're too proud to admit the walls are tilting. I held her gaze for a moment longer than she was comfortable with, then walked past her toward the mudroom, grabbing my keys. I didn't need to go anywhere. I just needed space. Behind me, I heard her voice, quiet at first. "So that's it? You're really just done?" I turned halfway, one hand on the doorknob. "I'm done pretending I matter to you, Leia. That's not the same thing." I left the house before she could respond. For the next few days, we barely crossed paths. I worked from the home office upstairs. Rachel kept her distance, and Leah holed herself up in her room, emerging only to grab food or take long, silent showers. The air was thick with the kind of tension that doesn't spark fights. It just wears you down like humidity on your skin. I'd catch glimpses of her walking through the hall, eyes puffy but shoulders high, like she was still clinging to some moral high ground that was rapidly crumbling beneath her. I'll be honest, part of me hoped she would come around, that she'd knock on my door one evening, sit on the edge of the couch and say, "I didn't mean it. I was angry. I took you for granted." Not for the apology itself, but for the clarity, the moment of truth where the mask slips and the person beneath finally sees the damage they've caused. But that moment never came. Instead, Rachel pulled me aside one night after dinner, her tone soft but edged with urgency. "She's planning to move in with Dan." I blinked. "What?" "She thinks he'll let her stay for a year. Said she'll take community college courses there and transfer later." I couldn't even speak at first. It was like someone had replaced my stepdaughter with a different person, a version of her that made decisions purely out of spite and fantasy. "She really believes he'll support her?" I asked finally. Rachel nodded, folding her arms. "He told her he's ready to step up now, that he regrets missing so much and wants a second chance." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic. Dan couldn't even maintain eye contact at family events. His longest commitment in the past decade was a pit bull he rehomed after 2 months because it chewed his sneakers. But Leah had made up her mind. 3 days later, she packed a suitcase. Just one. Tossed in clothes, makeup, her laptop, and ironically, a framed photo of her and me from her 10th birthday. I watched her hesitate as she held it. For a second, I thought she'd set it down, maybe even stay. Instead, she tucked it into the side pouch and zipped the bag shut. Rachel drove her to the airport. I didn't go. I didn't ask for a goodbye, and she didn't offer one. The house felt quieter after that, but not in the peaceful way I hoped. It was more like something had been surgically removed, and we were just waiting for the scar tissue to form. Rachel didn't blame me. If anything, she blamed herself for always trying to keep the peace instead of holding Leah accountable sooner. "She needs to see who Dan really is," she said one night as we sat outside sipping wine under the string lights she convinced me to install last summer. "She's going to," I replied. "That's the part one hate." And she did. 2 weeks passed before the first crack appeared. It started as a text to Rachel. "Mom, is there a way to transfer health insurance remotely? Dan doesn't cover prescriptions and I need refills." Then came a call, which Rachel took in the bedroom with the door closed. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to. But the silence afterwards said enough. Rachel came out with a pale face and that clenched jaw she always had when trying not to spiral. "He forgot to pick her up from class twice." A week later, another text. "He pawned his PS5 to pay the electric bill. The fridge went out and there's moldy food. I'm staying in the guest room and it smells like wet dog." I read it over Rachel's shoulder and bit my tongue. Another week, another message. "I think he's drinking again. He promised he wasn't, but he passed out on the couch with a bottle in his hand. Said I was being dramatic when I confronted him." This one was followed by a voicemail. Rachel played it for me without speaking. It was Leah, her voice trembling. "Mom, I don't feel safe here. I don't know what to do. He yelled at me tonight. I told him I might come back home and he said I was just like you. Then he slammed a door. I locked myself in the room. I don't think I can stay here." There was a long pause. Then, "Tell Greg I'm sorry." Rachel looked at me as the voicemail ended. "I think she means it this time," she whispered. I nodded once, slowly, but I didn't answer. Not yet. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about all those years picking her up from field trips, practicing spelling words, staying up with her when she had the flu. I thought about the ballet recital I filmed on a shaky camcorder. The nights I tucked her in and turned off the hallway light just how she liked it, slightly cracked so it wasn't pitch dark. I thought about the way she used to cling to my arm when we crossed busy streets and how that faded with time until it was just me reaching out into empty space. And I wondered, when does love become a transaction? When does being a parent turn into a job application with shifting requirements you can never quite meet? I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I came downstairs and found Rachel waiting at the table. She slid her phone toward me. It was her. She wanted to come home. I stared at the phone for what felt like an entire minute. It was surreal, really, seeing her name on the screen again, not attached to a sarcastic remark or a cold shoulder, but to a simple plea. Can I come home? Rachel didn't say anything. She just watched me quietly, letting me process it on my own time. In her eyes, I saw hope, but also fear. Fear that I'd say no. Fear that I'd say yes. Fear of what would happen next, no matter the answer. I picked up the phone, thumb hovering over the screen, then tapped to open the text. I understand if you both hate me, but I don't know where else to go. For a second, I saw the little girl I used to tuck in at night. The one who cried when she lost her stuffed turtle at summer camp. The one who once left a crayon drawing on my pillow with the words, "Thank you for being my stepdad." She couldn't have been older than 9 when she made it. I still had it tucked into a folder somewhere in my desk, even though the marker had faded and the paper had curled. But that little girl was gone. And in her place was someone who had grown into a teenager, then a young adult, shaped by choices she didn't always understand and words she couldn't take back. I set the phone down. "She can come back," I said finally. "But not like before." Rachel nodded slowly. "You want to set boundaries. She can sleep here, eat here, be safe here, but she needs to take accountability. I'm not going to pretend the last few years didn't happen. I'm not erasing everything just because she's scared." Rachel exhaled, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "That's fair." We texted her back together, told her she could fly home, that she'd have a place to stay, that we were glad she reached out, but we expected a conversation when she got here. No dodging it, no pretending nothing happened. She agreed right away. I'll admit it, part of me thought she'd flake. That maybe Dan would sober up just long enough to convince her to stay, to sell her one last dream about family reunification and redemption. But 3 days later, Rachel and I stood in the airport arrivals terminal and watched as Leia came down the escalator with a single duffel bag slung over her shoulder. She looked smaller. Not physically. If anything, she'd grown a little taller, a little leaner, but emotionally, like the world had knocked the wind out of her and she hadn't quite learned how to breathe again yet. When she saw us, she froze for a second, unsure whether to wave or run or cry. Then Rachel walked up first and pulled her into a hug. Leia clung to her like she hadn't touched solid ground in weeks. And when they finally separated, she turned to me. She didn't say hi. She didn't force a smile. She just looked at me with tear-filled eyes and whispered, "I'm sorry." I didn't hug her right away. I nodded. "Let's get home." Then we talked. The car ride back was quiet. Not awkward, just solemn. Like all of us were preparing for something important. Leia sat in the back seat like a guest instead of someone returning home. She didn't scroll on her phone. Didn't put in earbuds. She just watched the streets pass by like they were scenes from a city she didn't recognize anymore. When we got home, Rachel went to start dinner, leaving me and Leia on the porch. It was late afternoon, golden hour, and the backyard looked peaceful. Birds chirping, wind rustling through the trees. I sat down in one of the chairs. Leia stood by the railing, arms crossed, unsure of where to begin. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said after a long silence. "But I want to say it. I was awful to you. For years." I didn't interrupt. I thought, I don't know, that if I kept some distance it would make things easier, less confusing. Dan always made me feel guilty for getting close to you, like I was betraying him. That stung more than I wanted to admit. Did he say that outright? Not exactly, but he'd joke about it. Call you the substitute. Say stuff like, "Don't let him think he's your real dad." I guess I started to believe it. And when I was old enough to throw it in your face, I did. She looked down at the porch floor. "And then when you pulled back, I told myself you were just proving me right, that you never really cared. But I know that's not true. I just didn't want to admit I pushed you away." She paused, then looked at me. "You were there for everything, and I never said thank you. I acted like it was your job to love me no matter what, but you didn't have to do any of it. You chose to." I let that sit for a moment. Then I said, "I wasn't perfect. I know I probably overstepped sometimes. Tried too hard to be something you didn't ask for. But I never did any of it for credit, Leia. I did it because I wanted you to feel safe, to know you were wanted. I know that now, she said quietly. We sat in silence for a while after that. No grand hugs, no background music swells like in a movie. Just the sun setting and the soft creak of the porch swing in the breeze. Eventually, I said, "So, what's your plan?" She sighed. "I want to stay here, start over. I can take community college classes and work part-time. I'm not asking for a handout, just a place to rebuild." I nodded slowly. "We can do that, but you'll need to hold yourself accountable. That means working, budgeting, helping around the house. And when you're ready, we'll talk about St. Augustine again, but only if you've shown you're serious." She nodded. "I am." That night at dinner, things still felt tentative. She asked for the potatoes like she was borrowing something expensive. Rachel and I kept the conversation light. Music, movies, what had changed around the neighborhood. But there was a softness in the air that hadn't been there before. A shared understanding that we'd been to the edge of something and somehow managed to step back. Over the next few weeks, Leia began to show she meant it. She found a part-time job at a bookstore, started community college that fall, paid for her own books, did laundry without being asked, and more importantly, she changed how she treated me. No more eye rolls, no more fake politeness. She even started calling me Greg again, not with sarcasm, but with familiarity. It wasn't Dad, but it wasn't distant either. Felt earned. One evening after a long shift, she came home with a small paper bag. "Hey," she said, setting it down in front of me. "I got you something." I opened it. Inside was a keychain, wooden, hand-carved. It had the words, "Thank you for choosing me," engraved in the center. I didn't say anything. I just smiled. 2 years later, Leia reapplied to St. Augustine. This time, she wrote her own application essay. She didn't ask me to edit it. She wanted it to be hers. And when the acceptance came again, she didn't wave the letter around. She walked into the kitchen, placed it on the table, and said, "I'd like to try again with your help this time, if you're still willing." I picked up the envelope, turned it over in my hands, then looked up at her. "I think we can figure it out," I said. She smiled. No smirk, just real gratitude. And as she walked out of the room, I noticed the keychain I'd added to my car keys. Still there, still worn. Now on to the next story. Story 5. I'm Nate, 31, and I've always been the background character in my own family. Not bitter, just honest. I was the reliable one, the fixer, the one who quietly paid for things without making a scene. I never competed with my siblings for attention, never made holidays about myself, and never expected anyone to notice when I picked up the check or took time off work to help someone move or recover from surgery. I just did it. That's how I was raised. Don't ask for praise, just do the right thing. My sister Camila, 2 years younger, was the star of the show. She always had this magnetic pull, the kind of energy that made people bend toward her like sunflowers. She wasn't cruel exactly, but she knew how to use people, especially me. She had that smile that could make a lie sound like a compliment, and for most of our lives, I let her get away with it. Camila's wedding had been a year in the making. A Pinterest fever dream come to life. Pastel florals, handwritten name cards, a string quartet, the whole 9 yards. And who do you think helped foot the bill when her fiancé's family backed out of contributing last minute? Yours truly. She called me the investor like it was a joke, but I didn't laugh when I wired $8,000 to secure the photographer she'd been obsessing over since high school. I didn't say a word when I offered to cover the honeymoon flights because Mom said they were strapped this month. And Camila looked at me like it was just expected. I kept the receipts, not because I wanted to hold it over them, but because deep down, a part of me still believed that if I did enough, gave enough, maybe, just maybe, they'd see me as something other than a spare part. The shift started a week before the wedding. I'd been coordinating with the photographer, finalizing the payment for the honeymoon, even drafting the speech Camila had begged me to give at the rehearsal dinner. But then, little comments started slipping through. "Oh, Nate, maybe don't wear that navy suit," Camila said casually on the phone. "It's a bit gloomy." Then Mom chimed in. Just try not to draw attention. Camila deserves the spotlight, sweetie. I laughed it off, old habits, but something about the tone stuck with me. It wasn't teasing. It was surgical. 2 days before the ceremony, the message came. No greeting. No warning. Just a clean little bubble of text on my phone that read, "Don't bother showing up. You'll ruin the photos." I stared at it for a full minute. Thought maybe I read it wrong. But no, that was it. My sister, the girl whose prom I drove her to in a hailstorm because her date bailed, the woman I helped move 3 times in 2 years, the bride I'd spent thousands helping, was telling me I wasn't welcome. Not even because of something I'd done. Just because I might ruin the aesthetic. What twisted the knife wasn't even the text. It was the notification underneath it. Mom liked a message. I clicked it. She liked it. My mother had liked the message where I was told not to come to the wedding. That little thumbs up icon might as well have been a slap in the face. I didn't respond. Not immediately. I didn't call. I didn't yell. I just sat there in my apartment staring at the wall. I thought about all the times I'd put myself second. All the birthday dinners I paid for. All the emergencies I'd helped navigate. And for what? To be told I'd ruin the photos. I took a deep breath, stood up, and walked to my desk. I opened my laptop. First, I emailed the photographer. "Hi, this is Nathan. I'll no longer be requiring your services on Saturday. The payment was from my account, and I'd like to proceed with a cancellation. Please confirm receipt." They responded in less than 20 minutes. "Sorry to hear that. We'll process the refund minus the deposit." I didn't care about the deposit. Then I logged into my travel app and canceled the flights I'd booked for Camila and her fiancé to Santorini. I'd paid for them on my own credit card under my name. Refunds processed. Still silent, still calm. But something deeper had snapped. Not in a vengeful way yet, more in a realization. They saw me as a wallet, a prop. Not a brother, not a son, and certainly not someone whose absence would matter. I started thinking back to things I brushed off for years. How Camila used to mock me in front of her friends and call it just teasing. How Mom once told me after a rough breakup, "Well, you were kind of hard to love." I'd swallowed it all, convinced myself it was just family being blunt. But that night, I saw it for what it really was. Contempt dressed up as familiarity. I didn't text back, didn't say a word. I wanted them to feel the silence. I wanted them to walk into that venue and realize something was off. Not right away, slowly like a fog creeping in. The speech gone. The photographer vanished. The honeymoon canceled. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. The next morning, I drove to Dad's old house, now rented out to one of my childhood friends. He still kept a storage shed in the back, and inside was a dusty plastic bin with old family keepsakes. Photos, videos, even some of Camila's childhood paintings. I borrowed a few of the more unflattering ones, like her in the infamous dolphin costume at age 10 or her Braces-era headshot. Then I went to a local print shop and had a few blown up into tasteful little posters just to spice up the photo area they'd set up for guests. By noon, I dropped them off anonymously at the venue coordinator's office labeled Camila's Memory Lane. No return address, just a sticky note. Surprise from a loving relative. Still no response from Camila or Mom. No apology, no call. It was like I'd ceased to exist. But that was the thing. They'd assumed silence meant surrender. They didn't realize I was just watching, waiting, letting the cracks form. Because when everything you've built rests on someone else's money and effort, it only takes one person stepping back for the whole house of cards to tumble. And it was only a matter of time before it all came down. The day before the wedding, I went into the office like it was any other Friday. I didn't take time off, didn't clear my schedule. I answered emails, signed contracts, smiled at coworkers, but inside I was tracking every move they made like a general watching enemy formation shift before a siege. Around lunchtime, I got a ping on my phone. A group message I had apparently not been removed from. Oversight on Camila's part, I'm sure. Camila, quick update for everyone. The photographer had to cancel last minute. Emergency or something. We're scrambling, but if anyone knows someone good, please reach out. Need someone by tomorrow. There it was. The first tremor. I read it 3 times. sipping my coffee like it was wine. Then 30 minutes later, another message. Camila. Also, anyone know what happened to the honeymoon flights? Site says the reservation no longer exists. If this is a glitch, I'm going to lose it. The knot in my chest started to unwind just a little. It wasn't satisfaction yet, not quite, but it was clarity. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't confused. I wasn't wondering what I did wrong or how I could fix things. I was watching people who had used and dismissed me slowly realize I wasn't going to let them anymore. I didn't reply, didn't offer help. The group chat started blowing up with speculation. Her fiancé, Brandon, chimed in once, asking if the photographer was paid in full. Camila ignored the question. I figured he didn't know I had paid for most of this. They probably told him I was just helping a little. That's the thing about people like them. They lie as naturally as breathing, even to the people they supposedly love. By 5 p.m., Mom called. I stared at the screen ringing. Her name, that generic smiling photo she'd taken back in 2014. My thumb hovered, and then I declined the call. I waited for the voicemail. She didn't leave one. Then 2 minutes later, a text. Nate, please call me. There's a mix-up with the travel stuff and Camila is getting anxious. We need to talk. Anxious. Not sorry, not confused. Just anxious. Like I was an IT guy and they were reporting a bug in the system I needed to fix. That night, I cooked myself dinner. Steak, asparagus, real mashed potatoes. Poured a glass of wine, lit a candle, put my phone on silent. I played an old album I hadn't listened to in years and sat in my little apartment finally, feeling like I had some control over my own story. The next morning was the wedding. I didn't go. Instead, I put on a comfortable hoodie, grabbed a coffee from the bakery down the street, and walked to the park. The air was crisp, the world quiet, and I felt detached. Not angry, not bitter, just done. Then, at 10:11 a.m., my phone buzzed again. My cousin Liam. Bro, did you cancel the photographer and honeymoon? What is happening? I replied simply, I did. Ask Camila why. He responded, she's sobbing. Your mom's yelling at the planner. Brandon looks like he wants to walk into traffic. I didn't type anything else. Just locked my phone and watched a dog run after a pigeon. A few hours later, I checked Instagram. Camila had posted one of those black text on white background story updates. Not everything goes according to plan. Thank you to everyone who showed up and helped us through a very unexpected day. Love you all. The comments were a mix of generic support and subtle confusion. You still looked beautiful. Hope you still had a magical day. Can't wait to hear the story someday, OL. But what really got me was the caption on the only photo she posted. Her and Brandon in the church doorway, clearly taken by a guest's iPhone, grainy, off-center, cropped weird, hashtag against all odds, hashtag just married. Against all odds? You mean against the odds of disrespecting the one person funding half your fantasy wedding? The moment felt surreal. A year ago, I would have killed to be part of that day. I would have stood beside her, grinning for the cameras, giving the speech of a lifetime, helping her live her dream. And now I didn't feel like I'd missed anything. I felt like I'd finally woken up from something. But it wasn't over, because at 8:07 p.m., my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole. It was Brandon. Hair messy, tie crooked, expression unreadable. He knocked once, then stepped back. He looked tired, not furious, not confused. I opened the door slowly. He blinked at me. Hey, can we talk? My stomach tightened, but I kept my face still. You guys aren't on your honeymoon? His jaw tensed. Yeah, about that. I let him in, and that's when everything started to unravel faster than I could have imagined. Brandon stepped into my apartment like a man walking into enemy territory. Not with aggression, but with the weary energy of someone realizing too late that he might have backed the wrong team. He glanced around, taking in the minimalist setup. Books stacked on the end table, one lonely plant wilting in the corner, the untouched wine glass still on the kitchen counter from the night before. I gestured toward the couch. He sat down slowly, hands clasped between his knees, silent for a few seconds. long enough for me to wonder if he was rehearsing what to say or figuring out how to say it without implicating himself. Then finally he spoke. "I didn't know," he said, voice low. "I swear to you, Nate, I didn't know you were paying for any of it." I raised an eyebrow. "None of it." He shook his head. "Camila said your gift was just covering the photographer's deposit. That's it. She told me her uncle was paying for the flights, that the honeymoon was his gift to us." I leaned back in my chair. "Did you ever ask?" He sighed. "I did a couple of times." She'd changed the subject. I figured, I don't know. She was stressed. Weddings are a mess. I didn't respond right away. There was a part of me, small but loud, that wanted to unload every petty detail. Every receipt, every phone call, every subtle jab I'd swallowed. But I could see in his face that he was already unraveling. The way his fingers tapped nervously against his knee, the redness creeping into his eyes. He wasn't just tired, he was shaken. He cleared his throat. "Look, I know we don't really know each other that well, but I wanted to come here myself. She's in full meltdown mode. She thinks you ruined the wedding out of spite." I gave a small humorless laugh. Out of spite? Or because I was told I'd ruin the photos? Brandon winced. I saw the text. Her phone was open while she was crying on the bathroom floor. I read it. "I didn't even know your mom liked it until you mentioned it just now." "She didn't think I'd actually step back," I said. "None of them did. That's the problem." He nodded slowly, letting the words hang there. Then he leaned forward, elbows on knees. "She said something this morning," he said. "After we realized the photographer was a no-show and the flight confirmation was gone. She was screaming. And in the middle of it, she blurted out, 'He was never supposed to matter this much.' That one hit different. It shouldn't have surprised me, but hearing it said aloud from her fiancé made it real in a way it hadn't been before." "She said that?" I asked. He nodded, eyes full of something that looked like regret or shame, or both. "She didn't even mean it maliciously. More like she genuinely didn't understand how things could fall apart without you." I let out a long breath through my nose. "And your mom," he added carefully. "She's been egging it all on. Camila didn't want to cut you out entirely. She was just upset. The photos thing was supposed to be like petty, temporary. Your mom told her it would blow over if she just stayed firm." I felt something cold settle in my chest. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something quieter. Resignation. Maybe a confirmation of everything I'd suspected for years but never dared confront. That mom had always favored Camila. That she saw my usefulness as something to be harvested, not appreciated. That she assumed I'd always come back, always pay, always forgive. "She told Camila to hold the line," Brandon said. "If she gave in to you now, she'd be setting a dangerous precedent." Her words. I laughed. Not out of amusement, just disbelief. Like I'm a toddler trying to get a cookie before dinner. Brandon nodded, lips pressed into a thin line. "She also said, if you really cared, you would have still shown up." Of course. They were rewriting the narrative in real time. I could hear it already. Nate was selfish. Nate sabotaged the day. Nate made it about him. Never mind the money. Never mind the silence. Never mind the years of being treated like an afterthought until my bank account was needed. Brandon stood. "Look, I don't know what happens next. Camila is not speaking to me right now. She's crying in the bathtub and your mom is blaming the wedding planner for everything. But I didn't want to leave it like this. I needed you to know this wasn't how I wanted to start our marriage." I tilted my head. "You still think it's starting?" That one caught him off guard. He blinked, hesitated. I don't know." His honesty surprised me, but it was the kind that came from someone whose illusions had just been shattered. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "I found this in her planner. Thought you should have it." He handed it to me. Inside was the speech I'd written, the one I drafted weeks ago that Camila had asked for and never acknowledged again. It was printed and highlighted. Notes scribbled in the margins. "Make this part funnier. Cut this too sappy. Add more about her." I smiled without warmth. Nice to know I was being edited. Brandon gave me a sheepish look. I'm sorry, man. For all of it. I didn't reply. After he left, I sat on the couch and stared at that speech for a long time. The words felt like they belonged to someone else. Someone still clinging to hope that a few kind lines could mend years of damage. But I wasn't that person anymore. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting my apartment in orange light, my phone buzzed again. Camila. First a call, then another, then a voicemail, then a text. I hope you're happy. Everyone's asking where the photographer is, why the photos look like garbage. Brandon won't talk to me. I know what you did and you'll regret it. I put the phone down without replying. I didn't regret it. Not even a little. 3 days passed. I didn't answer a single call. Didn't reply to a single message. Camila texted again the next morning something about how I'd ruined the most important day of her life. Then again later that night, a paragraph about betrayal, family, and forgiveness, followed by a line that sounded suspiciously like Mom wrote it. You've made your point. Now stop acting like a child. Brandon didn't follow up, but I wasn't expecting him to. He'd done his part, he came clean. I don't know what conversations happened behind closed doors between them, but if the silence from his number meant anything, I suspected it wasn't going well. He wasn't defending her anymore. He wasn't defending them. But on the 4th day, a knock came. Not the doorbell, just a knock. Loud, short. I opened it to find my mother standing there, arms crossed, expression tight. I didn't invite her in, just leaned against the frame, blocking the entrance. She didn't wait for me to speak. You made your sister cry so hard she threw up. I gave her a dry look. And she's humiliated. We had to explain to everyone why the wedding had no professional photos, why the honeymoon was postponed, why you weren't there. Why wasn't I there, Mom? I interrupted, arms crossed. She blinked, clearly not expecting pushback. Because you got offended over a text message. You sabotaged your own sister's wedding because your feelings were hurt. No, I said steady. I didn't go because I was uninvited. Don't twist this. Camila told me not to come. You liked the message. She looked away for a second, just a flick of the eyes, then squared her shoulders again. It was obviously an overreaction. She was stressed. You knew she didn't mean it. Didn't mean it? I laughed once, sharp. Mom, you liked the message where she told me I'd ruin the photos. That's not stress. That's cruelty with a thumbs up. She shifted on her feet. You always do this. You dramatize everything. No, I used to internalize everything. I snapped. I let it slide when you ignored my birthdays. I let it slide when Camila mocked me in front of her friends. I let it slide when you said I was hard to love. I let it all slide. But this time you pushed too far. And the only reason you're here is because your golden child's perfect little wedding fell apart. Her jaw tightened. You know what your problem is? You want to be the victim in everything. You couldn't just support your sister. You had to make it about you. I stared at her. You know what? I used to believe that if I just stayed quiet, worked hard, paid the bills, maybe one day I'd finally be enough for this family. But I finally figured it out. You never saw me as a son, just as a resource. And now that I've shut off the tap, suddenly I'm selfish. Her face reddened. Whether from anger or embarrassment, I didn't care anymore. You're overreacting, she said again, quieter now. No, I said, voice calm but final. I'm done reacting. I'm done being the afterthought who pays for everyone else's mistakes. I canceled the honeymoon because it was mine to cancel. I canceled the photographer because I paid every cent. And I didn't show up because I was told not to. That's not sabotage. That's compliance. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I stepped back. You should go. Nate, go. She hesitated, then walked off without another word. That night, I went to my filing cabinet and pulled out a manila folder. Inside were all the receipts, the wire transfers, the hotel bookings, the plane tickets, the contract with the photographer, every financial contribution I made to that wedding. I scanned them, printed copies, and wrote a short letter. To whom it may concern, Attached are the receipts and bank statements for all services and expenses paid toward Camila's wedding and honeymoon. As you can see, I am the sole financial contributor for the following: $8,000 to the photography company, $1,200 for the honeymoon flights and resort booking, $1,600 in additional expenses related to decor, catering supplements, and transportation. In total, $13,800 of my personal funds were used at the request of the bride and family. All expenses were paid in good faith under the assumption that I would be part of the event. I was subsequently told via text message not to attend with no apology or clarification since. I have decided not to pursue legal recourse, but I am formally requesting that my name no longer be mentioned in any narrative surrounding the alleged ruining of the event. I did not ruin the wedding. I simply withdrew. Best of luck, Nathan. I mailed a copy to my mother, another to Camila and Brandon, and a third, just for good measure, to my aunt, the one who always hosted holiday dinners and had a habit of accidentally bringing up family gossip in front of 30 people. It was surgical. Clean. No drama, just facts. 2 weeks passed. No response. And then, without fanfare, Camila posted a photo on Instagram. Her and Brandon sitting on a bench near a lake. No hashtags. No hearts. Just a caption that said, "Starting fresh." I didn't know what that meant. Whether they were still together, whether she was trying to spin a new story, I didn't care. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to get back in. I wasn't waiting for an apology or some half-hearted reconciliation over holiday wine and fake smiles. I was done. And with that closure, I made the last decision I needed to make. I called my bank and had the final auto payments shut off. My parents' cell phone plan, which I'd been quietly covering for years, the Amazon Prime account under my card that they all shared, and the streaming service I'd never used but kept active because Camila couldn't live without it. They could live without me just fine, apparently. And now they would. The next morning, my phone buzzed with the final ripple. A group text titled Family Chat. Camila, Nate, can you fix the phone plan? It's saying inactive. Mom, we're all having issues with the internet. Did you change something? I looked at the screen. The silence from me spoke louder than any answer ever could. I left the group. That was the last message I ever received. And strangely, it felt less like cutting them off and more like setting myself free. Not from them, from the version of me who kept trying to prove his worth to people who had already decided he was only as good as his credit limit. They didn't lose a brother. They lost their personal ATM. And I finally found peace in not being invited. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My parents bought a vacation home and posted, "Nothing like creating memories with the ones who matter." I wasn't in a single photo. I didn't make a scene. A month later, they asked me to help furnish it. I said, "You made your home. Furnish it with them." By evening, my phone was exploding with rage. When my parents posted that caption under a carousel of sun-drenched family photos at their new lakeside vacation home, I was sitting in my apartment staring at the screen, wondering how a person could feel so present and so invisible at the same time. Every photo looked like it belonged in a brochure. Glowing golden hours, wine glasses clinking, someone always laughing. There were photos of my brother helping our dad set up the grill, my sister lying in a hammock with her kids, my mom wrapped in a blanket on the deck watching the sunset. Even the family dog got more camera time than I did, because I wasn't in any of them. Not one. And yet, I paid for 40% of that house. Not a single mention in the caption. Not a thank you, not even a tag. Just nothing like creating memories with the ones who matter. I had been the one who found the property online when my parents were casually browsing and thought the idea of a vacation home sounded fun. I was the one who called the realtor, arranged the virtual tour, and talked them through the loan pre-approval process. I even flew out there on my own dime to walk through it in person and check for issues. The septic was a mess. There was mold in the guest bathroom. The cellars were shady and almost backed out twice. If I hadn't stepped in, called in favors, pushed things forward, and fronted my portion early, they would have lost it. My parents contributed 30%. The rest was split between my brother and sister, and let me be clear, they wired the money over after everything had already been arranged. They didn't attend one inspection, one planning call, or one legal back and forth. It was like watching people arrive at a dinner party after you've already cooked everything, then listening to them argue about who gets to blow out the candles. So I stayed quiet. Even after the closing, even after I heard from my aunt that my sister had been telling people our parents had bought it for us kids, I kept my mouth shut. I let them have their little version of the truth. But when that post went up, something shifted. Not just because they'd left me out of the photos, but because they chose that caption. It wasn't just a trip. It was a statement. 2 weeks later, my dad texted like nothing had happened. "Hey, we're heading back up this weekend. Can you help with the furnishing stuff? IKEA trip maybe, and we want to hit a couple higher-end places." Took me a few hours to reply. I thought about it. I thought about how I had mapped out the kitchen layout myself. I thought about how I had spent 3 nights arguing with the contractor about the flooring. How I had been treated like a co-owner when they needed something. But now that the fun part was here, I was suddenly a ghost. So I replied, "You made your home. Furnish it with them." That's all I said. By nightfall, the rage began. Missed calls, long texts, and a passive-aggressive group message my mom sent that said, "It's really hurtful when people turn their backs on family for no reason." My brother sent me a thumbs-down emoji and didn't follow up. My sister accused me of being manipulative. My dad just wrote, "Well, very disappointing." I didn't respond, but I took screenshots. Everyone, it's funny how people show you exactly who they are the moment you stop serving them. I had spent months making that house a reality. They'd spent days turning it into a place where I didn't exist. And they had no idea what was coming next. After I ignored the messages, the group chat went dead. Like someone had shut the lights off in a room full of shouting people. But I knew that silence too well. It wasn't retreat. It was strategy. I could already imagine the conversations happening behind the scenes. Someone would suggest, "Just give her space." Another would say, "She's always been dramatic." And my mom would definitely bring up how I hold things in too long. A few days later, she sent me a Pinterest board. No message, just a link titled, "Lakeside Vibes for Fall." It was full of navy and cream color palettes, porch lanterns, and throw blankets folded over tan chairs. Like nothing had happened. Like I'd never been erased. That was the tone they always went for when guilt didn't work. Pretend it didn't happen and hope I'd fall back into place. I didn't open it. My brother was less subtle. He called me while I was working, didn't leave a voicemail, then texted, "Whatever this is, get over it. You're blowing it up." That's how he handled most things. Put the blame in your lap and call it a solution. A few more days passed and then I saw it. My sister posted a story of her and my brother struggling to haul a box sofa onto the porch. The caption said, "No Laura this time, so I guess we're doing it the hard way." Oh, there was no tag, no wink, just a flat shot and a loaded sentence. Like they were proud to be proving something. They kept furnishing it badly. I watched as they made mistake after mistake. An outdoor love seat that was meant for indoors. A wall-mounted TV hung so low it looked like a fireplace screen. Fake plants in every room because no one wanted to drive back often enough to water anything. Then the problems started. The plumbing backed up after one of the kids flushed a toy down the guest toilet. There was a leak in the laundry room ceiling. They missed a payment on the property tax estimate because no one had set up the alerts. The neighbor left a typed note on their door about parking too close to his driveway. He threatened to call the county next time. And through all of that, they didn't call me. Not at first. Instead, I heard about it from my cousin Jonah, who texted me after seeing my dad at a birthday party. He said my name came up. I braced myself. Apparently, my dad had said I was being cold lately, that I had a thing about control, and that I was making a big deal out of a couple thousand. I paid over $200,000 for that house. I found it, protected it from falling through 3 times, and pushed it across the finish line. But now I was being reduced to someone who was acting like she owned it. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to be the quiet helper anymore. I went into the shared Google Drive we had used for the entire process. I pulled every file I had uploaded, contractor estimates, invoices I'd paid up front, bank transfers, inspection notes, appliance receipts. Everything with my name on it came down. The only document I left was a single PDF. The ownership agreement with my 40% clearly outlined and initialed by all of us. I didn't say a word. I just let them notice it. 2 days later, my sister called. She didn't waste time. She told me they were short on cash. She said they maxed out their cards on the renovations and my brother had taken out a personal loan. The property tax notice caught them off guard and they were trying to avoid falling behind before the winter season. She asked if I could help carry it just until spring. I said no. Not angrily, not emotionally, just no. There was a long pause before she hung up. Later that night, my mom left a voicemail. She said I was punishing the family, that I was choosing money over love. My brother posted something vague about selfish people hiding behind boundaries. My dad forwarded me an article about how siblings lose touch over pride. And just like that, I became the villain. But none of them saw what was coming. Not yet. After I told my sister no, everything changed. The fake concerns stopped. The check-ins vanished. The group chat stayed quiet. No more emojis. No more quick question messages. It was like I'd been voted off an island I helped build. My brother unfollowed me on Instagram, then blocked me 2 days later. My mom went silent. My dad didn't even bother with the guilt trip this time. He just vanished altogether. That would have been fine, except suddenly I started getting vague texts from extended family. Hope everything's all right. Saw your sister the other day. She said you've been going through something. Your mom mentioned the vacation house. Anything you want to talk about? I knew what that meant. The rewrites had begun. I said nothing. Let them guess. Let them build their stories. Then I got a call from my cousin Heather. She doesn't usually get involved in family drama, but she called to ask if it was true that I was refusing to help maintain the house. I just laughed. She said she overheard my dad at a family barbecue explaining to someone that Laura decided the house didn't matter to her anymore, and that she's been acting distant since we all tried to include her. He actually used the word include. 40%. I paid 40%. I was the reason they even had that house. But now, according to the version they were selling, I was the cold, withholding one. The sibling who took a step back out of nowhere, the one choosing money over family. And just like that, I became a cautionary tale at every family get-together. Meanwhile, things started falling apart. Quietly at first. The repairs they'd ignored started stacking up. The plumbing leak returned. They tried to patch it themselves and ended up with mold in the laundry closet. My brother accidentally left the back door unlatched, and a raccoon got in, ruined one of the new rugs, and chewed through the pantry cabinet. The property taxes were higher than expected because they'd underestimated the area's valuation increase. And when winter rolled in early, they realized they hadn't winterized the pipes properly. It was a mess, a very expensive one, and still no apology. What made it worse was how stubborn they got about it. They started doubling down. My sister posted this long, dramatic caption on Facebook about how family is about who shows up, not who signs checks, which wasn't even subtle. I had to stop looking at their posts entirely. Everyone felt like a public slap. Thanksgiving was the final confirmation. They hosted it at the vacation house, even though they were clearly struggling. My parents invited extended family. Photos went up that night. Plates of food, pumpkin candles, firewood stacked by the hearth. My place at the table was never mentioned. They had replaced me with an aesthetic. Then 3 days later, my brother texted me. Hey, we need to talk about the property tax. It's due and no one else can cover it right now. No greeting, no explanation, no ownership. Just a problem tossed in my lap. I replied, I already paid my share. It's in the agreement. He left me on read. Later that night, my sister sent me one of her long texts. It wasn't a request. It was a performance. She talked about how hard the last few months had been, how they were trying to make things work, how she believed I never meant to hurt anyone, and how maybe I could help just this once, because they would have done the same for me. That was when I understood something I probably should have realized earlier. They didn't feel guilty. Not really. They just missed what I gave them, and they were starting to realize I wasn't coming back. After my sister's long, carefully worded text about how they were just trying their best, I didn't reply. I didn't even open it all the way. I just let the preview sit there on my lock screen. You used to care more than this. I stared at it for a minute, then let the screen go black. They wanted me to feel guilty. They needed that version of me. The one who'd drop everything to fix their mess and fund their peace. That version of me didn't exist anymore. A week later, I got a certified letter. Not from the county, not from the bank, from a lawyer. My dad's. Apparently, it was a request for a temporary reassessment of the ownership agreement based on what they called my non-participation in property management and shared maintenance. It was surreal. They were trying to legally reduce my stake in the house I found, financed, and built with them because I didn't want to play their game anymore. I didn't call. I didn't yell. I forwarded it to my attorney and went about my day. 3 days later, their lawyer had dropped everything after reviewing the original agreement. It was airtight. Ironically, I'd made it airtight thinking it would protect us. But the fact that they even tried, that was the part one couldn't shake. This wasn't about family anymore. This was about power. And they thought I'd be too ashamed or too sentimental to push back. They were wrong. Then, out of nowhere, I got a message on LinkedIn from a woman I'd never heard of. Someone who worked in marketing, apparently a friend of my sister's. She apologized for the weird way of reaching out, but said she felt uncomfortable staying silent. She'd overheard my sister at a wine night telling people I had mental health issues, that I was trying to punish our parents because I've always needed to feel in control. She said they were worried I might sell my share to someone random and that I'd ruin the family's future. The woman ended her message with, "I don't know you, but you seem nothing like the way she described you. Just thought you should know." I didn't reply, but I read it 3 times. I logged off LinkedIn, deleted the app, and then pulled up my savings spreadsheet. They knew I had money. They always did. That's why they weren't afraid to make enemies with me, because deep down, they were sure they'd need me again. And right on cue, it happened, the refinance attempt. I got a call from the bank asking for a signature to move forward on a loan for the vacation property. A loan I never applied for. My name was on the deed, and they tried to move forward without me. The loan officer had flagged the ownership structure because the paperwork didn't match their claim of full control. If I hadn't added extra language during the purchase requiring joint consent on any financial moves, it would have gone through. I had never felt more exhausted and more clear-headed at the same time. They weren't just entitled. They were reckless. I didn't say anything. I didn't confront them. I updated my access restrictions, pulled the last shared documents from the cloud, and submitted a notice to the county registrar reinforcing my share of ownership and blocking any future refinance attempts without written consent. Then I waited. Winter hit harder than expected that year. A storm knocked out power for 3 days. The pipes in the guest bathroom burst. Insurance covered some of it, but not all. The floors buckled, the drywall warped, and the furnace, already limping, gave out completely. That's when the text started again. First from my sister, "Are you still refusing to help? Seriously?" Then from my dad, "Laura, you have the means. You're choosing to let your family struggle." Then my mom called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail and I still haven't listened to it. I started getting screenshots from a cousin showing group chat messages they'd been posting about me. My sister said I was spiteful. My brother called me a ghost with a checkbook. My mom told someone that I used to be kind. That night, I called my lawyer and asked what it would take to sell my share. He said it was possible. Tricky but doable. He asked if I really wanted to go through with it. I told him I hadn't decided yet, but I had. They thought I'd never walk away, but I already had. They just hadn't noticed yet. After the refinance failed and winter tore through the house like it was settling a score, the silence from me must have started to feel louder to them. I didn't respond to their messages, their guilt-heavy texts, or the carefully curated Facebook captions that read like indirect letters to me. I just let them talk to the space where I used to be. My phone stayed full of unread messages, but I kept reading other things instead. Emails from my lawyer, offers from investors, spreadsheets. I had started the process of valuing my share of the house. Quietly. No announcement, no dramatic reveal. Just steps being taken in a direction they never thought I'd go. And then things started to collapse faster than I expected. My brother got laid off. A full restructure, no warning. One day he was posting work selfies from his car. The next day he was online venting about corporate betrayal and new beginnings. I knew he didn't have a cushion. He was always the kind to stretch every dollar and call it living free. A week later, my cousin texted me that my sister's husband was in the hospital again. Something with his heart. The bills had already been steep the first time. Now they were talking about refinancing their own home just to stay afloat. As for my parents, I heard through someone else that they'd quietly started dipping into what was left of their retirement savings. That temporary withdrawal they made to invest in the vacation house, it was gone. The house wasn't appreciating. No one wanted to rent it during the off-season. And after the pipe burst, they didn't even have enough left to replace the furnace without taking out a loan. And through all of it, not once did anyone apologize. Not directly, not even close. They kept their pride and ate their consequences. Instead of accountability, they chose blame. I started seeing vague jabs online. My sister posted something like, "It's always the people closest to you who watch you struggle and say nothing." A few days later, my brother shared a quote about people who only care when it benefits them. My mom's version was quieter. She called relatives and cried, saying she didn't understand what I'd become, but they were careful never to say it to me. The truth was I hadn't become anything. I just stopped helping people who thought I owed them more than I owed myself. Then, out of nowhere, a woman messaged me on LinkedIn. She said she didn't want to get involved, but thought I should know that my sister had been talking about me at a birthday party. She told people I was unstable, controlling, and had ruined what could have been a beautiful thing. She even claimed I'd planned to cut them off all along. I thanked the woman and logged off. That same week, I got a call from the bank. Someone, my parents, had tried again to use the house for financial leverage. They didn't even tell me. The only reason the process stopped was because of the legal block I'd already put in place. And that's when I knew they were desperate. That house wasn't a dream anymore. It was dragging them down. And the only person who could throw them a rope was me. But they'd burned every bridge between us and left the ashes in full view. That Friday, my lawyer emailed me 3 names. Buyers. All real, all interested. One of them offered full cash above the estimated share value just to close before the new year. I didn't accept, but I didn't decline either. The next morning, I woke up to 5 missed calls from my mom. I thought maybe someone had died. Then the knock came. My parents were at my door. I hadn't seen them in nearly a year. My mom held a small box of pastries from the cafe near my old office. My dad looked like he hadn't slept much. They didn't ask to come in. They just stood in the hallway like they didn't know what they were doing there. I waited. Finally, my mom said, "We went to someone." I asked, "What does that mean?" "A monk," she said. "Someone your aunt recommended. He asked us what had gone wrong. And when we told him, he said, 'This isn't a coincidence.' He said, 'When someone gives from their heart and gets shut out, it creates debt. That debt invites misfortune.'" My dad nodded. "We didn't believe it at first, but everything's been falling apart since you stopped talking to us." They weren't there to argue anymore. They were there to surrender. He said, "We have to make it right. That we have to ask for your forgiveness or things won't change. That the energy has to be cleared." I looked at them and didn't feel much of anything at first. Not anger, not relief, just disbelief that it took this much for them to see what they'd done. I asked, "Why now?" My dad looked at the floor. "Because we don't know what else to do." I didn't let them in. We talked in the hallway. They apologized. My mom cried. My dad said he was sorry for trying to turn the rest of the family against me. That they should have acknowledged what I gave, what I carried, and what I built for them. And after all of that, I forgave them. But I still didn't step back in. They thought the forgiveness meant everything was fixed, but forgiveness doesn't mean access, not anymore. After they left my apartment that night, the hallway smelled like cold air and bakery sugar. I stood there with the pastries still in my hand, not sure whether to laugh or throw them out. There was no satisfaction in their apology. No sense of justice, just 2 people who had run out of ways to keep pretending they were the good guys. They went to a monk. That part still echoes in my mind sometimes. Not a therapist, not a family mediator, a monk. Because when nothing else worked, when manipulation, guilt, and legal threats all failed, they turned to something spiritual. Not out of enlightenment, out of desperation. The monk told them they had created a debt, that asking for forgiveness was the only way to stop the collapse. That misfortune had attached itself to them because they'd wronged someone who gave freely. I was that someone, and they knew it. They thought that night in the hallway was the end of it, that their apology would reset the board and that I'd come back. They didn't understand that forgiveness isn't a time machine. It doesn't undo what was done. It just closes a door and keeps you from dragging the rot into the next room. The week after, things got strange. My sister sent a long email titled "Starting Fresh" with bullet points, literal bullet points, talking about how we could rebuild communication and suggesting we take a weekend trip, just her and me, to heal. Like she hadn't just spent the better part of a year badmouthing me to anyone with ears. My brother sent me one text, "Truce." That's all it said. No context, no follow-up. My mom started forwarding me listings again. Cabins, beach properties, random fixer-uppers with notes like, "Could be fun to build something new together someday." I didn't even open the links. They were pretending like the last year had just been a bad weather patch. Like the hurricane hadn't flattened half the house. Then came the letter. My dad, in actual handwriting which I hadn't seen since childhood. It was carefully written, almost too careful. He said they didn't expect me to return, but the furnace at the vacation house had officially died. The space heaters weren't keeping up. Insurance wasn't covering what they thought it would. They were falling behind. He said they weren't asking for charity, just help. A temporary loan. He promised they'd pay me back. That was the part that broke something loose in me, because they already owed me more than money. Respect, credit, truth, all the things they had withheld until their lives began unraveling. And they thought a few sorries would make me forget the cost. They didn't know I was already in the final stage. The buyer I'd been speaking with, the one who didn't care about family complications, was still interested, still waiting. I sent the final confirmation to my lawyer the next morning. Within a week, my share of the vacation home no longer belonged to me. The papers were signed. The wire transfer cleared. My name was off the deed. It was over. They found out the way people like them usually find out, by trying to make a move and realizing the board had changed. I got a call from my brother. He sounded exhausted. He said, "So, you really sold it?" I didn't answer. He sighed, then said, "You really got the last word." He was wrong. That wasn't the last word. It was just the first time I chose myself completely. My mom left one final voicemail after that. This one I did listen to. She didn't cry this time. She didn't beg. She just sounded quiet, tired. She said, "You were right. We thought forgiveness meant we'd get you back. But we didn't realize forgiveness doesn't mean we get to keep you." Then she said, "You gave more than any of us, and we gave you nothing but conditions. We're sorry. We're truly sorry. I just hope you're okay." I am. The house is still there, but I heard from someone they're trying to sell it now. Off-market, quietly. Not just because they can't afford it, but because no one wants to be there anymore. The place feels heavy, they said, like something was lost in it and never came back. They were right. Now on to the next story. Story 7. At Christmas, my sister gifted me a book called How to Be Less Cheap. Everyone thought it was hilarious. I smiled, said thanks, and opened her envelope. Inside was a loan application I was supposed to co-sign. I tore it in half. Her face dropped instantly. Christmas at my parents' place had always been messy in its own way. But this year, Alyssa turned it into something else entirely. She walked in late as usual, loud and overconfident, wearing that ridiculous faux fur coat she probably couldn't afford and dragging a Gucci bag I knew for a fact was secondhand because I saw the same one on Facebook Marketplace the week before. She kissed everyone on the cheek like she was visiting from Paris instead of crashing in her ex's apartment in Glendale. We all gathered around the tree, doing the usual half-hearted small talk, pretending to enjoy each other's company. Alyssa had clearly planned something. She kept eyeing me like she couldn't wait to get to her moment. Finally, she handed me a box wrapped in shiny gold paper and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I got you something you really need this year." I already knew it wasn't going to be thoughtful. I opened it slowly, more out of caution than curiosity. Inside was a book with a bright yellow cover and huge block letters. How to be less cheap. Pause. Then everyone laughed hard. My dad actually clapped his hand on the couch. My cousins snorted. Even my Uncle Steve, who barely talks, shook his head like it was the joke of the year. I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because I've learned to survive by staying quiet when she pulls this kind of crap. Alyssa has always needed a villain in her little dramas, and I used to let myself play the role just to avoid the fallout. But this time felt different. Don't forget the envelope, she added, grinning like a child who just dropped a frog in your lap. I opened the envelope and pulled out a trifold document. First, I thought it was a check. Then I realized it was a loan application. Her name was already typed in, her information filled out, and a pink sticky note pointed to the bottom where it said, "Co-signer," underlined. I looked at it, then looked at her. She was still grinning, so I tore it straight down the middle. No words, just a clean, slow rip, and I dropped the pieces on her lap like it was wrapping paper. Silence. My mom stopped pouring cider. My cousin stopped chewing. My dad actually stood up. "Jesus, Rachel," he said, like I was the one who ruined Christmas. Alyssa's face twisted, confused and furious, like she couldn't decide which mask to wear next. Victim or aggressor. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine. My hand didn't shake. Alyssa followed. She waited until no one could hear and said I was being dramatic and selfish, that she needed the loan to move out of LA and start over. She said, "You know, I always planned to pay you back. I just thought since you don't have kids, you'd actually be useful for once." I didn't say anything back, but my mom did. She'd been standing behind the fridge door. She stepped in and said, "Rachel doesn't owe you a cent, and maybe next year you should focus on getting your life together instead of humiliating your sister." Alyssa blinked like she got hit with cold water. And then she left quietly. No big goodbye, no hugs, just coat, keys, door. We all pretended like Christmas wasn't ruined. We ate pie and made small talk and opened the rest of the gifts like the room wasn't full of smoke. My dad tried to explain it away. "She's under pressure. She's just emotional. She didn't mean anything by it." But I knew better. This wasn't about a loan. This was about Alyssa pushing, assuming I'd bend like always. But this time I didn't, and that's when everything began to shift. 2 days after Christmas, my dad texted me. "Alyssa says you humiliated her. Just apologize and make peace." Not an ask if I was okay, not what happened, just apologize. I stared at the screen, then replied, "She gave me a loan application wrapped as a gift." He didn't respond. I figured that was the end of it until the calls started. 3 different banks in 4 days, all asking if I was aware I'd been listed as a reference. One even asked for income verification. I demanded to know who submitted the application. They said, "Alyssa Monroe." She'd used my information without asking, without telling me. I immediately filed a fraud alert and froze my credit. I texted her once, "Don't ever use my name again." No reply, not even a half-assed denial. Then she went public. 3 days later, she posted a picture of her and my dad on Instagram, cropped to make it look like they were having this perfect father-daughter Christmas. Caption: "Some people forget the meaning of family. Glad I still have mine." And the comments were exactly what she wanted. Her friends, old roommates, even some mutual acquaintances I hadn't talked to in years, all chimed in, "You're the strong one. Haters going to hate. Keep shining." I knew it was bait. I didn't bite, but it got worse. She moved in with my mom the next week, supposedly for a few days until she figured out her living situation. That turned into unpacking her trash bags into the guest room, dumping beauty products across the bathroom counter, and leaving empty Starbucks cups on every flat surface. She slept in until noon and played TikToks on full volume like she was living alone. She told my mom she was in between opportunities, and that she wasn't built for mediocrity. My mom called me 5 days in. She sounded completely drained. She doesn't lift a finger. She stays up all night and calls it brainstorming. She said she's working on a pitch deck. I asked for what, and she just walked away. I told her the truth. This was Alyssa. This was always Alyssa. You either set a boundary or you get steamrolled. Meanwhile, my dad kept pushing. He called me again to say I was being cold, that I was punishing Alyssa for asking for help, that if I just co-signed, none of this would have happened. I reminded him, car repairs, emergency rent, credit card bailouts, thousands over the last 5 years. When did she ever pay any of it back? I asked. He didn't have an answer. Then Alyssa made her next move. She messaged my ex, the one who cheated on me with her old roommate, the one I hadn't spoken to in over a year. She told him I was not doing well, that I'd isolated myself, and that maybe he should check in on me. He sent me the screenshots. She wasn't even subtle. She wanted to make me look unstable, probably hoping it would circle back to me and rattle me into silence. It backfired. I blocked her everywhere. Phone, socials, even email. My mom begged me not to, said it would only make things worse. I told her it wasn't my job to make things easier anymore. Eventually, even my mom had enough. She gave Alyssa a quiet ultimatum: get a job or move out. Alyssa responded the only way she knows how. She posted another picture, this time from my mom's kitchen holding a glass of wine she didn't buy, with the caption, "Some people only love you when you need nothing from them. Watch how fast they turn when you stop playing weak." She was unraveling, but she still thought she was the victim. She still thought she could outmanipulate her way through. She was wrong. It started with the fake job interview. My mom had finally snapped after 2 weeks of Alyssa sleeping in, doing nothing, and blasting her phone like she was auditioning for a reality show. She called a friend who worked at a small accounting firm in Pasadena and got Alyssa an interview for a front desk assistant job. Not glamorous, but steady. Perfect for someone supposedly trying to rebuild. Alyssa acted grateful. She even pretended to polish up a resume that looked like it had been made in Canva by someone drunk. She left that morning in heels and a blazer like she was headed to brunch and came back 3 hours later with a shopping bag and a half-eaten pretzel. When my mom asked how it went, Alyssa just said, "Oh, I canceled." It felt off. The energy wasn't right. Then she locked herself in the guest room and posted a selfie with the caption, "Protect your peace, even if they call it laziness." That night, my mom locked up her wine cabinet and hid her purse. The next day, my dad called me again, this time to say, "I'm giving Alyssa a little help. You've made your point, but I won't watch her fall apart." He didn't ask me how I was, just told me what he was going to do and hung up before I could respond. I didn't care about the money. I cared about the fact that everyone kept throwing lifelines to the person who lit the boat on fire. But Alyssa wasn't done. A week later, I got an email from my company's HR department. Someone had anonymously accused me of freelancing for a competitor and using company systems to do it. They attached screenshots of files that were real old mock-ups from a logistics redesign project I'd done the year before. Stuff I had shared with Alyssa when she said she wanted to learn about UX and pivot into tech. She saved them, waited, then weaponized them. I had to spend the next 48 hours walking HR through timestamps, Slack messages, and archived project folders to prove everything was mine and that I wasn't moonlighting. They believed me eventually, but told me to be more cautious about who I share company content with in the future. That was the moment it hit me. Alyssa wasn't spiraling. She was retaliating. I texted her once, "You really want to start this war?" "Fine." She didn't answer, but I knew she saw it. The same week, 2 of my friends reached out saying they'd gotten weird DMs from Alyssa. One said she was worried about me, that I'd become paranoid and was cutting everyone off. Another one got a message saying I wasn't myself and maybe they should check in for safety. She was setting up a narrative, making me look unstable and isolated, like everything she was doing was out of concern, not spite. I started locking everything down. Passwords, 2-factor authentication, social media. I deleted old DMs and removed shared access from old Google Drives. Alyssa had always been careless, but this wasn't careless anymore. This was calculated. Meanwhile, my mom was at her limit. I knew the call was coming. When she finally rang, she didn't even try to hide the defeat in her voice. She took my credit card and ordered DoorDash 3 times in one day. One of them was just bubble tea. I asked her to start helping with groceries, and she told me to respect her healing process. I told my mom to kick her out, not to threaten it but to actually do it. And she did. Quietly, she packed Alyssa's clothes, makeup bags, 2 ring lights, and a stack of untouched self-help books into 3 contractor bags and put them in the garage. Then she told her to leave. Alyssa didn't leave quietly. She cried, screamed, called my mom abusive, and filmed herself on her phone saying she was being discarded like trash by the woman who raised her. Then she called our dad. He came, picked her up, and drove off without saying a word to my mom. That night, Alyssa posted a story from the passenger seat, face half lit, captioned, "Sometimes all you have is yourself, and sometimes that's still too much for them." Then nothing for a week. No calls, no texts, not even passive-aggressive posts. I thought maybe it was over until she texted me, "Congratulations, you got what you wanted." No punctuation, no emotion, just venom. I stared at it for a long time before deleting it because she still didn't get it. I didn't want her to lose. I just didn't want her taking me down with her. It was almost eerie how quiet everything got. 3 weeks. Not a text, not a subtweet, not even one of her cryptic Instagram quotes about cutting off fake energy. It felt like the calm before something awful, and I kept telling myself to enjoy it while it lasted. But deep down, I knew Alyssa wasn't done. She never stops unless she's out of options or planning something bigger. Turns out she was planning. It started with my cousin Morgan's wedding. Morgan's one of those people who tries really hard to keep the peace. She'd invited both me and Alyssa months ago, back when things were only mildly toxic, not a full-scale disaster. I never RSVP'd. I didn't even open the invitation. To be honest, after everything, I didn't feel like being in a room full of people pretending we were one big happy family. I didn't want to smile through another conversation where someone asked, "So, are you and your sister talking again?" 3 days before the wedding, I got a text from Morgan. "Can't wait to see you this weekend. So happy you two are back on good terms." I stared at it, confused. Then the other text started. Liv, our other cousin, sent me a screen recording of Alyssa's Instagram story. In it, Alyssa had posted a fake iMessage conversation. She'd literally crafted an entire text thread where I supposedly apologized, said I missed her, and said I wanted to make peace at the wedding. She even added herself responding, saying she forgave me and that healing is a journey. Realistically, she used my old contact name and even my punctuation style. People believed it. Morgan believed it. That's why she thought I was coming. That's why everyone suddenly thought we were working it out. I had to call Morgan and explain everything. To her credit, she handled it well. She was embarrassed, a little shaken, and just kept saying, "I don't get it. Why would she do that?" "Because she needs to win even if she has to fake the scoreboard," I told her. I said I wouldn't be coming. She understood. But Alyssa went. Of course she went. She showed up late, made an entrance, and wore white. Not a hint of cream or beige. Stark, blinding, rhinestone-studded white, full length with a slit that nearly hit her hip. She swept into the ceremony like she was the bride, hugging people she hadn't spoken to in years, grabbing Morgan for a photo and posting it with the caption, "When forgiveness leads, families heal. Proud to stand by you today." Morgan looked visibly uncomfortable in the picture. She texted me later that night and said, "She pulled me aside and told me you were just going through a lot and didn't want to ruin your progress." It was sick. She was creating her own version of reality and selling it like gospel. But she wasn't done. 2 days later, I got a DM from someone I hadn't spoken to since my first job out of college. He sent me a screenshot. Alyssa had emailed him claiming she was gathering testimonials for a legal matter involving me and asked if he had any memories of me being emotionally unstable in the workplace. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't a joke. It was an actual email from Alyssa's real account. She was actively trying to destroy my reputation in writing. I contacted a lawyer. We drafted a formal cease and desist. I sent it to Alyssa directly. Certified mail, signature required. She received it. I know because 3 hours after the delivery was confirmed, every single one of her social media accounts went dark. No posts, no stories, no tweets, nothing. She disappeared. At first, I thought maybe it worked. Maybe she finally realized she couldn't keep pushing without consequences. But she didn't disappear. She just went underground. My dad called a few days later, furious. "Did you actually threaten her with a lawyer over some misunderstandings?" I asked if he wanted to see the screenshots. He said, "You're going too far. This is still your sister." I said, "She's not acting like one." He didn't like that. He started saying I was cold, vengeful, and ungrateful for everything the family's done for me. I almost laughed. Ungrateful for what? Decades of being the stable one while she blew through every lifeline. He hung up without another word. After that, it got quiet again, but it didn't feel peaceful. It felt like a rope being stretched to its limit. I was still checking over my shoulder, locking accounts, and watching for signs. And then something unexpected happened. Morgan called me in tears. Alyssa had called her, begging for a place to stay. She told Morgan she'd lost her housing situation, that our dad wasn't being supportive anymore, and that she just needed a week or two to get things in order. Morgan said no. That's when I knew Alyssa had hit a wall. She'd burned every bridge she had, even the quiet ones she assumed would always be there. My mom had locked her out. I cut her off. Now, even Morgan, the peacemaker, the one person who never took sides, said no. She was officially out of places to land. The GoFundMe was how I found out she was homeless. Not a call, not a message, not even a secondhand update through our dad. Just a link someone forwarded to me in a group chat with the message, "Is this real?" It was real. The page was titled, "Starting Over After Family Abuse." It had a photo of Alyssa looking gaunt and wide-eyed, like she'd taken it just after crying. Maybe she had. The description read like a drama script. She claimed she'd been kicked out with nothing, accused of unforgivable lies, and that she was surviving despite being betrayed by the people who were supposed to love her the most. And she listed me by name. Buried halfway through the paragraph, right between the sentence about being gaslit by her only sibling and rejected by a narcissistic mother, was, "Rachel refused to help. She watched me drown and walked away. She got donations, not thousands, but enough. Enough for food, a motel, maybe a week of survival." The comments were full of strangers validating her version of events. "Stay strong, girl. Family can be so toxic. You deserve better." She replied to almost everyone and kept posting thank you videos from different locations. A Starbucks bathroom, a city bus stop, a hallway with peeling paint. Each video came with another knife, another little spin on her story to make herself the hero of it. I didn't say anything publicly. I didn't report the fundraiser. I didn't correct the lies. I just watched from a distance while the same girl who used to fake sick notes in high school ran the saddest con of her life. Then quietly, she dropped offline again. A week passed. Then a call from an unknown number while I was on a Zoom meeting. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I listened. It was a woman from a housing program, a caseworker. She said Alyssa listed me as her emergency contact, that she was trying to get placed in a job assistance program, and needed someone to vouch for her. I didn't hesitate. I called back and said, "No, I won't be part of that. I'm not involved in her situation anymore." There was silence on the other end. Then the woman just said, "Understood," and hung up. For the first time, I didn't feel bad. Not numb, not conflicted, not pissed, solid. Like I'd finally stopped letting her rewrite my life around hers. Then came the email from my dad. Subject line, "Family dinner. Let's talk." Just those words. No body text, no explanation, just an invitation to come over next Sunday and put things behind us. I almost deleted it, but my mom called that night and told me she was going to go. "I don't want to," she said. "But if I don't go, he'll say I'm the one keeping the family divided." I agreed to come, but only to listen. I made that clear. Sunday night, we showed up to our dad's house. Everything was staged. Candles lit, wine poured, table set like it was Thanksgiving. Alyssa was already there. She looked different. Not humble, not regretful, just tired. Her clothes were rumpled. Her hair tied back with one of those emergency drugstore elastics. No makeup, no filters, just the real her. And that alone made the room feel heavier. We sat, we ate, and no one spoke. Then our dad launched into this rehearsed speech about unity and forgiveness and letting go of grudges. He kept looking at me like I was the one who needed convincing. Then Alyssa jumped in. She started with something almost resembling an apology. I know I went too far. I was hurt. I lashed out. But it never landed. Felt like she was reading a script she didn't believe in. Then she said, I've lost a lot. I'm asking for a little compassion. Not from him, from me. I looked at my mom. She just shook her head. Then I looked at Alyssa and said, You don't want compassion. You want access. Silence. My dad tried to intervene, but I held up a hand. I told Alyssa I wasn't going to support her anymore. No money, no housing, no job references. I said if she wanted to rebuild, she'd have to do it without dragging me down with her. I told her I forgave her, but that didn't mean she got to come back. She didn't cry. She didn't fight. She just nodded once like she'd expected it. The night ended with my dad walking me out. He said, You don't have to cut her off forever. I said, You don't have to keep pretending she's still a child. He didn't answer. That was the last time I saw her. You want an ending? That's it. A dinner full of forced smiles and barely held in disappointment. A sister who finally ran out of people to blame. A family that tried too late to act like things weren't broken beyond repair. It took 4 months for her to come back around. No warning, no build-up, just another email, this time from my dad again. Subject line, Sunday dinner. Everyone's invited. No mention of Alyssa, but I knew. I debated deleting it. Then I got a message from my mom. He says she's turning things around. Just show up. You don't have to say anything. So I went, not because I believed anything had changed, but because I wanted to look her in the eye one last time and see what was really left. The house was quieter than usual. It felt like my dad was trying too hard. Everything perfectly in place, like he was expecting royalty instead of 2 daughters who barely looked at each other. Alyssa was already there, sitting at the table, looking ordinary. Her hair was flat, her nails bare, and she wore a turtleneck that didn't match the weather. She didn't say anything when I walked in, just gave a small nod, like she didn't know how to speak to me anymore. Dinner started off civil. My dad did most of the talking about work, the neighbors, football. My mom barely spoke. She just picked at her food and kept her eyes on the middle of the table like she couldn't believe she was doing this again. Then halfway through the meal, he brought it up. She's trying, he said. She's got a part-time job now. She's been staying clean. She's looking into certification programs. He looked at me. It hasn't been easy. You know that. I didn't say anything. That's when Alyssa finally spoke. I'm not asking for much, she said. I just need a little help to stay on track. The room froze. She continued. Said she needed someone to co-sign a lease on a small studio she found. Said her job didn't pay enough to get approved on her own. Said she wasn't asking for money, just a signature. I didn't even have to answer. My silence did it for me. But then my dad leaned in, elbows on the table, and said, Just think about it. If you really want this family to heal, maybe this is the step. I looked at him, then at Alyssa, and then my mom, who still hadn't said a word, spoke up for the first time. She already gave more than anyone, she said. You can't keep asking her to pay for the healing. Alyssa flinched. Not dramatically, just enough that I saw it. My dad leaned back, frustrated. So, we're just going to let her fail again? My mom snapped back. Maybe failing is the only way she learns. The rest of dinner was quiet. Afterward, as I grabbed my coat, Alyssa followed me to the door. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She just looked at me and said, This time, I really am trying. I said, Then try without me. She nodded once like she already knew the answer. As I stepped outside, my dad called after me, She's still your sister. I didn't turn around. I just said, That's not always a good thing. And that was it. No explosion, no redemption arc, just a broken pattern trying to repair itself without the tools. A family pretending to move forward while still dragging the same weight behind them. I haven't heard from Alyssa since, but I'm not watching the door anymore. Now on to the next story. Story 8. Mom texted, We're skipping your son's birthday. Things are tight. I said, of course. A week later, I opened Instagram. My family was in Paris, matching outfits under the Eiffel Tower, 147 photos. I just replied, then I'll skip your mortgage payment. Good luck. For 40 minutes, my phone was exploding with missed calls. I exploded when I saw the photo. Not figuratively. I actually threw my phone across the kitchen. It hit the fridge, slid down behind the recycling bin, and I just stood there staring at the spot where it disappeared like my brain couldn't register it. It wasn't just a photo. It was the confirmation of something I already felt in my bones. That they lied again. And this time, they didn't just lie to me. They hurt my son. A week earlier, my mom had texted me the same flat message she always sends when she's about to disappoint someone. We're skipping the party. Things are tight. No explanation, no apology, just that. As if it was a bill they were choosing not to pay this month. Only it wasn't a bill. It was my son's 8th birthday. He is a kid who talks about his grandparents constantly, who always asks if they'll be at the party before I even send out the invites. A kid who made 2 extra cupcakes with me because grandma always wants chocolate. They didn't come. They didn't even call. That night, after the candles were blown out and the guests had left, he asked me if they were mad at him. I'll never forget that. I was wiping frosting off the table when he said it, and I remember the exact way my stomach dropped. I told him, of course not, that they just had some things come up, but the look in his eyes, I knew he didn't believe me. He went to bed early, said he was tired. I heard him crying behind his door. I didn't tell anyone. Not my husband, not my friends, because deep down I was embarrassed. Embarrassed that my own parents could treat my kid like this. Embarrassed that I'd let it happen again. They've always been like this ever since I started making more money than them. Somehow every financial emergency lands in my lap. Need a bill covered? Abigail will take care of it. Need help with car repairs? She won't say no. They even used my credit card for my sister's engagement party and promised to pay me back by the end of the month. That was 8 months ago. I let it go like I always do, for the sake of peace, for the sake of family. But then I opened Instagram. The first photo was my sister holding a glass of champagne in front of a giant window, Eiffel Tower in the background. I froze. Maybe it was a flashback, but then I saw the caption, "First night in Paris. Family trip begins. France." First night. Then it was my mom posing with my dad in matching linen outfits under the Eiffel Tower, laughing like they were in some travel commercial. There was a group photo. My parents, my sister, her fiancé, all of them standing in front of some ornate gate with their arms around each other, like they were the happiest, tightest-knit family on the planet. I felt my chest tighten, like I couldn't breathe. They hadn't just gone on a trip. They'd planned it, booked it, packed for it, smiled for the camera, edited, captioned, and posted it. All while pretending they couldn't be bothered to show up for their grandson's birthday while lying to me about money. They knew he'd be heartbroken. They did it anyway. I looked through every single photo. There were 147 in total. Cooking classes, boat rides on the Seine, shopping bags from luxury stores, my dad holding up a pastry with a handwritten sign that said, "Starving in Paris, LOL. It was a joke to them. I didn't cry. I didn't text them. I didn't even go pick up my phone right away. I went and sat in my son's room, just watched him sleep for a while, and I realized something. I wasn't angry that they went to Paris. I was angry that they never considered what it would do to him. That they knew he'd be hurt and didn't care enough to lie better. That they used me over and over, took my money, my patience, my guilt, and then still chose to leave him out. I finally picked up my phone and sent one message. "Then I'll skip your mortgage payment. Good luck." 40 minutes later, I had 13 missed calls. 8 from my mom, 3 from my dad, 2 from my sister. Then the texts started coming in. Accusations, guilt trips. How could you? And this is so unfair. Unfair. What was unfair was how they made my son feel like he wasn't important. What was unfair was how they expected me to keep playing the role of savior while they played tourists. I wasn't doing it anymore, and they had no idea what I was about to do next. I didn't reply to any of their messages. Not the all-caps demands from my mom. Not the guilt-drenched paragraphs from my dad. not the half-hearted apology from my sister. I didn't even bother opening the new voicemail notifications. I knew exactly how they'd sound. I'd heard those same tones 100 times in different situations. They mess up, I fix it. They pretend the whole thing was a misunderstanding. Not this time. The first thing I did was open my banking app and kill every automatic payment tied to their bills. It felt strange at first, almost like deleting a reminder to breathe. For months, I had been covering their mortgage while they swore things were tight. I believed them, or I wanted to believe them. But now I knew they were drinking wine in Paris with the money I was sending them to keep a roof over their heads. I stopped the payments. Then I took it a step further. My sister had access to a card on my account. I added her 2 years ago when she said she needed it to get through a rough patch. Gas, groceries, emergencies, that was the agreement. But somehow those emergencies always happened at restaurants or clothing stores or on weekend trips. And when I checked the most recent charges, there it was, a store in Paris. She used my card to cross the ocean while pretending she couldn't afford to show up for her own nephew. I removed her access with one click. It was almost too easy. By that evening, the messages took on a new tone. Less righteous, more desperate. My dad left a voicemail pretending to be calm, but slipping into lectures halfway through. My mom sent a text asking if I even cared what people might think when the bank called them. Then my sister sent a long message claiming she didn't know the Paris charge would go through that card, which was funny because it was a boutique I had never set foot in. I ignored all of it, but I wasn't planning anything beyond that. Not yet. I just wanted distance, silence, a break from decades of manipulation dressed up as family loyalty. Then the next morning, my work phone rang. My receptionist buzzed me saying my mother was on hold and that it sounded urgent. I took the call because I thought something might have happened to Grandma. It hadn't. My mother was just furious. She asked me why I was being cruel, why I was punishing them, why I would ever think it was okay to turn off the help. Like she wasn't describing a relationship between parents and their daughter, but a service I'd failed to provide on schedule. I didn't yell at her. I just told her the truth. That they missed my son's birthday, that he cried, that they lied about being broke while taking a luxury vacation, that this wasn't something we were going to bounce back from, and that I wasn't raising a child to believe that family could treat him like an afterthought. She hung up. That was all I needed to know. Later that afternoon, after stewing on it for hours, I called Grandma. I didn't plan to. I didn't set out to drag her into anything. But when she picked up and asked how the birthday went, my throat went tight and everything poured out. All the lies, all the money, all the excuses, how many times I forgave them, how many times they took advantage of it. And then Paris, the photos, the matching outfits, the fact that my kid cried himself to sleep thinking he wasn't wanted. I didn't even ask her for anything. She listened quietly, not interrupting, which was rare for her. When I finished, there was this long pause. I thought she might scold me for letting it go this far. Instead, she said something I didn't expect. They've been using you and they've been lying to me, too. I won't reward that. I didn't understand at first, not until she added, I've been updating my will this year. They're not getting what they think they are. The line went quiet after that, heavy, final, like a door closing. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something other than anger. I felt the shift, because they had no idea that Grandma wasn't just disappointed. She was about to change everything they'd been counting on. They must have known something shifted. I hadn't responded to a single message, hadn't answered any of the calls, hadn't sent one word since I texted about the mortgage. But suddenly, they were acting like we were all best friends again. 2 days after I spoke to Grandma, I got a 7 a.m. text from my sister. Thinking of you today. Hope you're doing okay. That's a girl who hasn't asked how I'm doing in over 5 years. Then my dad called and hung up after 2 rings. No voicemail. 10 minutes later, my mom sent a casual message asking if my son liked the birthday card they mailed last week. There was no card. I didn't respond to any of it. That same afternoon, my aunt, who hasn't messaged me in over a year, randomly reached out saying she'd been meaning to call, just wanted to check in and say she was proud of me and that I've always been so grounded. I stared at the message for a full minute before deleting it. They were spiraling. I could feel it. They didn't know what I'd done, but they knew I'd done something. They didn't know who I talked to, what I told her, or how much damage was heading their way. That uncertainty was eating them alive. And I didn't even have to say a word. The truth was Grandma had already called me again. She sounded calmer this time, not angry, just clear. She told me she'd met with her attorney that morning. She said it was time to stop enabling their behavior and stop pretending she didn't see what had been happening all these years. I'm rewriting everything, she told me. They've made their priorities clear. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like justice, quiet, cold, overdue justice. And the timing could not have been better. That Saturday, I got a call from my parents' neighbor. Their house had lost power. Not from a storm, not from an accident, from non-payment. They hadn't paid the utility bill in 3 months. I knew because I had been the one paying it. Every time they texted that they forgot or that they thought it was on autopay or that the bank was having issues, I logged into their account and covered it. Hundreds of dollars every few months on top of their mortgage. All of it quietly swept under the rug. This time I did nothing. They tried to reach me. My dad texted saying the food in the fridge was going bad, that they couldn't charge their phones, that it was not safe at our age to go without power. My sister sent a long message calling me cruel, saying I was letting pride get in the way of compassion. I didn't reply, and then they went to Grandma. She called me the next day and told me the whole story. They showed up unannounced with a grocery store bouquet and boxed cookies. They tried to laugh it off, saying the power thing was a fluke, that I'd been a little sensitive lately, and that it was probably just stress from working so hard and being a mom. My dad actually joked that maybe I'd finally learned how to say no. My sister said I was probably hormonal, as if that explained everything. Then Grandma told them the will was being rewritten. She told them they were no longer inheriting anything by default. That moving forward, the trust would be based on actual behavior, not birth order. That she was tired of the excuses, the lies, the freeloading, and the way they treated me like I was some walking ATM they didn't even respect. She said the room went silent. Nobody argued. Nobody asked for clarification. They just sat there in it. That night, I got a letter in the mail, 3 full pages, handwritten, from my mom. It started with soft guilt. How she never wanted things to get so ugly. How they were just trying to make memories while they still could. How the Paris trip wasn't even theirs and they didn't realize it would look so bad. Then came the pivot. If you could just help with the mortgage one last time. It wasn't an apology. It was a sales pitch. They still thought this was about money. They couldn't see that it had never been about dollars. It was about how small they made my son feel. How little they thought of me. How they treated me like a backup plan, not a daughter. I folded the letter and dropped it straight into the trash. Then I went and sat with my son while he played video games, and I realized I hadn't thought about how they'd explain all this to him. I wouldn't lie to him, but I didn't need to say much either. They were already showing him exactly who they were. And this time, I was finally letting them face the consequences. It started to unravel faster than I expected. 3 days after the letter, my sister showed up at my office. No warning, no appointment, just walked straight into the front lobby like she owned the place, acting overly casual, pretending she was just in the area. She'd never visited me at work once in my entire career. I was standing in the hallway talking to one of the project leads when I saw her through the glass, leaning on the reception desk, smiling like she hadn't used my credit card to shop in Paris. I could have asked her to leave. I probably should have, but I was curious. She hugged me like we hadn't just stopped speaking, and right away I saw it. The fake kindness, the new tone, that look of someone trying to talk their way out of a trap they never thought they'd fall into. She started by saying she was worried about me, that the family was worried, that she didn't want things to go on like this. Then she shifted, said Grandma was really emotional lately and maybe she wasn't thinking clearly, that maybe I had gotten into her head a little. I stood there listening, letting her dig herself deeper. Then she said something I didn't expect. We were just trying to get ahead of the will stuff. Make sure everyone's on the same page. And there it was. They knew. Somehow someone in the family had leaked that Grandma was changing the will. My guess? My aunt, the one who sent me that suspiciously warm text last week. She must have found out and told them, hoping to get ahead of it, maybe even insert herself into whatever drama was forming. But it was too late. I told my sister I had nothing to do with Grandma's decisions. I said if she wanted to talk to her, she should go ahead and do that. Then I walked her back out to the lobby and told the receptionist not to let her in again without a heads up. That night things took another unexpected turn. Grandma called me, said she wanted to bring me something. I assumed it was cookies or maybe an old photo album. Something sentimental, but she showed up on my porch with a manila envelope and sat down like she was dropping off homework. Inside were scans of every bank transfer I'd ever made to my parents. She had copies. Somehow she had been tracking everything. She said she didn't mean to pry, but she noticed things weren't adding up a while back. How they were always struggling but still going on weekend trips. How they never mentioned repaying me even once. So, she started paying attention. She had every wire, every card payment, every transfer I'd made to help them over the last 6 years. It added up to nearly $27,000. I just sat there staring at it. She said she gave the records to her lawyer, not just to show proof of where my money had gone, but to reflect it in the final version of the will. She was adjusting the inheritance to account for what I'd already given. Said it wouldn't be right to treat it like I'd gotten the same support when I'd actually been the support. Then she said something I didn't expect. "I'm naming you executor." I froze. She said she trusted me to be fair even when she wasn't around to explain her choices. That she was tired of the entitlement, the lies, and the performances, and that she wanted someone who had actually shown up for the family to carry out her last wishes. The next morning, all hell broke loose. Apparently, my parents had applied for a refinance loan weeks earlier, banking on getting the new inheritance figures to count as guaranteed future assets. But after Grandma's lawyer contacted their financial advisor to update the trust status, the bank denied their application. Their plan collapsed and suddenly they were 2 months behind on the mortgage. The lights had just come back on thanks to a desperate payment made by my dad's old friend. And now they had no loan, no inheritance guarantee, and no idea what was coming next. I got a group text that night from my mom. "Can we please talk? All of us. We're still a family." But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I owed them anything. I put my phone down. My son was asking me to help him build something with Legos, and I didn't miss a single piece. By the time the refinance collapsed, the calls shifted from annoying to relentless. It was like watching a machine come apart one piece at a time. First the lights, then the loan. Then my mom's car broke down on the way to some urgent appointment and I got a text from my sister saying it was ironic how everything's falling apart now, or just overdue. They stopped pretending after that. My dad left a voicemail that sounded like a threat disguised as a sermon. Said I was turning the family against each other. Said Grandma was too old to be making major decisions. My mom started sending dramatic texts about losing the house, losing our family, losing everything. I didn't answer any of them. They'd made me the villain in their story, and they were scrambling to rewrite the ending. Then came the worst one. My sister messaged me, "I told Grandma about the abortion you had in college. Good luck being her little angel now." I just stared at it. It was a low blow, obviously, but mostly it was stupid because Grandma already knew. I told her years ago, not for permission, just for comfort. She was the only person in our family I ever trusted with the truth, and she'd shown me nothing but kindness. But my sister didn't know that. She thought she was holding a grenade, and she threw it right into an empty room. So, I finally replied with one message. She already knows. You might want to focus on your own future because yours just got a whole lot smaller. The next day, Grandma called again. She'd updated her lawyer with a final addendum. She wasn't just adjusting the numbers anymore. She was pulling names. My parents were officially removed from any financial control of her estate. My sister was cut out entirely, not reduced. The trust would pass through me. Not because I asked, but because, in Grandma's words, "You're the only one who hasn't lied to me." That night they showed up at my house. All 3 of them. I watched from the kitchen window as they pulled into the driveway like it was any other visit. My dad in the driver's seat, my mom in the passenger, my sister already getting out before the car fully stopped. I didn't open the door. I didn't even move. My husband stepped outside instead. I didn't ask him to. He just opened the door, shut it behind him, and stood on the porch while they tried to talk to him like he was the problem. I couldn't hear every word, but I saw the gestures. My dad pointing toward the house. My mom putting a hand on her chest. my sister pacing like she was on the verge of some performance. My husband didn't say much, just stood there. Eventually, he nodded once and came back inside. "They're leaving," he said. And they did, finally, like they were expecting someone to come running out after them. No one did. The next day, Grandma called me one more time, said she wanted to finalize everything before the holidays. She didn't want them begging at Christmas dinner. I told her we wouldn't be going to Christmas dinner. Not this year. Not again. She asked if I'd come to her place instead, just me, my husband, and my son. I said yes. And just when I thought things couldn't get more absurd, they tried one last trick. A group vacation invite. An email sent from my sister's account. A formal message with a subject line that read, "Family healing trip. Let's start fresh." They were planning a cruise. January, warm weather, photos in the sun, all expenses covered. "You've done so much for us already." I stared at the screen. They still owed me money. They still hadn't apologized. They thought a vacation could reset everything. Couldn't. I closed the email, blocked the sender, deleted the message, and for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt around them in a long, long time. Freedom. They weren't done. After the cruise invite failed, they tried again. New subject line, same email thread, "Family healing weekend. Let's start fresh." No drama. This time, they included a full PDF itinerary, color-coded, family dinner, morning yoga, group therapy. A session labeled Open Dialogue, safe space for Abigail. Like I needed a designated hour to feel heard by the people who ignored my son on his birthday. They thought they could choreograph closure, book it between appetizers and a beach walk, but I didn't even open the file. Just hit delete. They tried one more angle, Grandma. A new email went out with her name in the subject. My sister sent it. Said Grandma would have wanted us all together. Said she deserved to see her family united before the end. That one almost made me laugh because Grandma was the one who had made sure they were out. She was the one who pulled their names, transferred legal control of the estate, and sat across from me with a cup of tea while her lawyer finalized every clause. She wasn't dying. She was finally living. So when I called her, all she said was, if they want unity, they can find it in group therapy on their own dime. The next morning, the cracks turned into collapse. My mom posted a long, dramatic Facebook status about family betrayal and losing the house that raised us. Then she added a GoFundMe link titled, "Help us save our home." I clicked it out of morbid curiosity. Photos of the house, photos of her and my dad smiling on the porch, a paragraph about unforeseen hardships and a temporary gap in finances. Nothing about the thousands I covered over the years. Nothing about skipping my son's birthday. Definitely nothing about Paris. My sister shared the link with a caption. Even when we're hurt, we forgive because that's what love looks like. Forgiveness was just another tool to them, another performance. I didn't respond, but someone else did. A friend from my office sent me a screenshot. She'd seen it, recognized the names, and asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine, better than I'd been in years. But that's when I saw it. Buried in the GoFundMe comments was a reply from someone I didn't recognize. It said, "Didn't you just get back from Paris?" That was all it took. The page came down within 2 hours, and in its place was silence. Thick, awkward, unmistakable silence. No more group invites. No more sudden acts of concern. No more veiled guilt trips or manipulative texts. And then came the final blow. I got a call from Grandma. She said she wanted to take a short weekend trip. Just me, my husband, and my son. Somewhere quiet, somewhere peaceful. A lake house she hadn't visited in years. She said she wanted to sit on the dock and hear my son tell her about his drawings in school and whatever else was on his mind. No forced photos, no fake smiles, just us. That we can change something. We spent 2 nights there. No phones, no drama. I watched my son show Grandma how to skip stones while my husband grilled outside. She told him stories about when she was little, when her own parents had nothing but a garden and a few chickens, and how even then family still showed up for each other. And when we drove back, I knew something had shifted permanently. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want apologies or explanations or forced reconciliation. I didn't need them to feel pain. I just wanted them gone. Let them figure out how to pay their bills. Let them claw their way through their GoFundMe free problems. Let them sit in the house they almost lost and wonder how they let things get this bad. Because they didn't lose me all at once. They lost me the first time they lied about needing money. They lost me the day they told my son they were too tight to come to his birthday. They lost me when they showed him that he didn't matter. And now they want to come back. Not because they love me, but because they lost access to my wallet, to grandma, to the future they thought they had locked down. But they don't get to come back. The next time they try to reach out, maybe a new baby, maybe another family funeral, I'll be polite, brief, because I'm not their daughter anymore. I'm just the one who finally said no. Now on to the next story. Story 9. During Sunday brunch, my brother raised his glass. To our walking ATM. Always there, never seen. Laughter filled the table. I smiled, lifted my glass, and said, to the ones who just lost access to the joint account. One by one, phones started buzzing. And then the laughter died instantly. All I wanted was one damn moment. Just a simple brunch, an hour or two where I could sit across from my family, tell them what I'd achieved, and maybe for once feel like they were actually proud of me. I got promoted. A real promotion, not one of those meaningless title changes that come with more work and no raise. This one mattered. After years of grinding, juggling bills, missing sleep, and raising my daughter completely on my own, someone finally noticed me. I was making enough now that I didn't have to check my account before buying groceries. I thought maybe that would matter to them, that they'd see how hard I'd worked, how much I'd done without asking anyone for a thing. I should have known better. The restaurant was one of those brunch experiences with $10 coffee and plates that looked like art projects. My mom insisted on it because this place has the right crowd. My dad didn't say much beyond a grunt when I showed up. He never does. My aunt came because she never turns down free food. And my brother Trevor, he arrived 20 minutes late wearing a hoodie and slides, smelling faintly like weed and apathy. He's 22, still lives at home, and doesn't work. My parents call him creative. Apparently, streaming video games 6 hours a day counts as a career now. I ordered a mimosa and tried to start the conversation. I told them about the promotion, how I'd been chosen over 2 senior staff, how it meant stability for me and my daughter, and how proud I felt finally being recognized. I waited for someone to say something, to smile, to care. My mom said, "That's great, honey. Maybe now you can take a real vacation." My dad muttered something about how money isn't everything. And Trevor just said, "Guess I don't have to worry about my internet bill this month." They laughed. I didn't. Still, I told myself to let it go. It wasn't worth ruining the day over. Then Trevor lifted his glass to our walking ATM. Always there, never seen. They all laughed. My mom even repeated it like it was clever. Something in me snapped right there. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was the kind of quiet anger that builds over years until it hardens into something unbreakable. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. I raised my glass to the ones who just lost access to the joint account. They laughed again, thinking I was joking. Then the buzzing started. My dad checked his phone first, then my mom, then Trevor. I'd spent hours the night before transferring every dollar out of the shared accounts I'd set up for them, the ones I'd opened so they wouldn't fall behind. I canceled the automatic transfers, deleted their access to my cards, and changed every password. Years of quiet financial babysitting were undone in one night. The laughter stopped. My mom's face went pale. My dad asked what I'd done. Trevor just stared at me, his phone still in his hand like he was waiting for it to fix itself. For the first time in years, they were all silent. And in that silence, something inside me settled because I realized that every bill I paid for them, every favor I said yes to, every time I helped when they never helped me, none of it ever earned respect. It just made me easier to use. They didn't come to celebrate me. They came to make sure their personal bank accounts still smiled back. But not anymore. I finished my mimosa, stood up, and said I had work to do. And for once, I meant it. I didn't expect gratitude. I wasn't that naive. But I guess a part of me thought that maybe Maybe once I cut them off, they'd at least stop pretending I owed them something. Instead, I got silence for 3 days. Nothing. Not a call. Not a text. Not even one of those guilt-laced memes my mom sends when she wants something but doesn't want to ask directly. It was like I'd been erased from the group, which ironically was the most peaceful my phone had been in years. But I knew them too well. It wasn't over. They weren't ignoring me. They were recalibrating. Then Wednesday night it started. My dad called. I let it ring out. He left a voicemail. The usual. Hey, I think something's going on with the electric bill. Probably a glitch. Can you check it on your end? I didn't even listen to the whole thing. I deleted it halfway through. About an hour later, my mom texted. She said, "Hey, sweetie, noticed something odd with the gas account. Did you maybe accidentally unlink it? It's okay if you did. Just let me know." Accidentally. That word got under my skin. They still didn't get it. Or maybe they just didn't want to. They thought this was a mistake I'd eventually fix, that I'd feel guilty, that I'd come crawling back with an apology and a fresh stack of payments. I didn't reply. Thursday came and went. Friday too. Nothing. But Saturday morning, I woke up to a string of texts from Trevor. Not angry ones, friendly ones. Weirdly friendly. "Hey, been thinking of getting into freelancing. Maybe marketing or design or whatever. Think you could look over my portfolio? Then maybe we could hang out sometime this week. Just catch up. Been forever." Then Mom made lasagna. "You should come by tomorrow." I stared at my phone, genuinely stunned for a second. Trevor hadn't texted me without needing something in over a year. And suddenly he wanted career advice. It was laughable. He didn't want help. He wanted the money attached to it. But still, I didn't delete the texts. I kept them just to see what he'd try next. The next day, my mom invited me over for dinner. Just dinner. No context, no emergency, just come by. "We'd love to see you." I said yes. Not because I missed them, not because I wanted to reconnect, but because I wanted to see how long they could keep up the act. I showed up that evening dressed like I had somewhere else to be afterward. Their house looked suspiciously clean. There were candles. Trevor had showered. My dad even put on a collared shirt. It was like stepping into a weird play where everyone knew their lines except me. Dinner was awkward in a way they tried to hide. My mom asked questions about work. Actual questions. My dad nodded along. Trevor sat there fidgeting, clearly waiting for the right moment. Eventually, he got tired of waiting. "We were thinking of maybe taking a family trip," he said casually. "Just something small. We think it could be fun." I looked at him. Then my mom added, "Maybe down to the coast, somewhere warm. Nothing fancy. It'd be nice to spend time together again." There it was, wrapped in the illusion of family bonding. A vacation they couldn't afford. A vacation they assumed I'd pay for. Like always, I smiled, told them it sounded nice, then changed the subject because I wasn't going to say no. Not yet. No gives them something to argue with. Maybe keeps them guessing. I left after dessert. Trevor tried to walk me to my car. He stood by the door, shifting from foot to foot like a kid trying to work up the nerve to ask for something. "You mad at me?" he said. I almost laughed. "No," I said. "Not at all." And then I got in the car and drove off. Because they were trying. For once they were trying, but not because they cared about me. They just finally realized what it felt like to lose their lifeline. And I wasn't in a rush to throw it back. The following week felt like I was being slowly circled. Like they were waiting for the right moment to strike again. Only this time, they were dressing it up as concern, warmth, and fake closeness. Trevor started texting me more than usual. Not in his normal lazy half-sentence way, but full messages. Like he suddenly knew how punctuation worked. One morning, he sent me a long text about taking initiative. Said he was exploring freelance work, thinking maybe social media marketing or crypto consulting. He attached a screenshot of a career quiz from a sketchy website that told him he had a 97% match for entrepreneurship. He asked me what I thought. Another day, he asked if I knew how to start an LLC. I didn't respond to either message. Then came the links to absurd job ads. One of them was a remote snack taster for a global flavor research company. Another promised 6 figures for rating dating app bios. He genuinely wanted me to look into them. It wasn't even insulting. It was pathetic. I realized then he had no clue what real work looked like, no idea what it took for me to get where I am. And he didn't care. He just wanted me back in position, back in giving mode. And he wasn't the only one. My mom ramped things up too. She started calling me at night, always around the same time like it was on her calendar. Said she missed hearing my voice. Asked how my daughter was. Asked if I was eating enough. It was strange, almost nice, but I couldn't shake the feeling that every kind word was just the setup for something else. She offered to babysit once. Once I told her I already had it covered, she backed off like she hadn't meant it in the first place. The guilt wasn't working, so they tried charm. I didn't fall for it, but I watched it all closely. And then out of nowhere, my aunt called. We hadn't spoken since the brunch. She never called unless she wanted something, and even then, she usually had my mom do it for her. I let it go to voicemail. She left one of those overly sweet messages full of empty praise. How proud she was of me, how incredible I was, how no one really understood how much I'd taken on. Then came the real reason. She said my parents were dealing with something private. Said they were too proud to talk about it, but that maybe if I reached out, I could help ease the situation. They were setting the stage carefully. That night, my mom called again. I answered. She didn't waste time. Said she and my dad had been thinking about downsizing. She mentioned that some bills had piled up unexpectedly. She said things had been harder than they let on, but that they weren't asking for a handout, just help. She talked a lot about starting over, clean slates, and how they just wanted to stabilize for good. I didn't interrupt. I let her finish. Then she dropped the number, $6,000. Just 6. Just as if it were a favor, a small bump to push the family back on track. She said, "This is the last time, Mila. I swear we'd never ask again. We just need this to get back to 0. That's it." And for a moment, I just sat there holding the phone, hearing nothing. It wasn't that I was shocked by the amount. It was that they really believed this whole act had worked. That a few weeks of pretending to care, of faking interest in my life, of asking about my daughter's favorite snacks. All of that was just an investment toward a payout. They'd built this whole campaign of warmth and closeness just to end it with a request. And they truly, truly thought I'd say yes. As I always had. Because no matter how tired I was, no matter how broke, no matter how many jobs I was juggling, I always showed up. I always made it work. But something had shifted in me. I was exhausted, not just tired, depleted. My life was hanging together by a thread. I was working long hours, skipping lunch to make daycare pickups, crashing into bed at night just to wake up and do it all over again. I was running on fumes, and they wanted $6,000 to make their lives a little more comfortable. I told her I'd think about it. She said she understood, but her tone said something else. She already believed she'd won, that the answer was inevitable. And I'll be honest, I didn't know my answer yet. I wasn't trying to play games. I was genuinely torn because maybe, just maybe, if I gave them the money, they'd finally stop. Maybe I could buy them off permanently. $6,000 for silence, for space, for freedom. It almost sounded worth it. Almost. After the call with my mom, I spent the night staring at the ceiling, trying to justify it to myself. $6,000. I kept running the math. Not just numbers, emotions, too. How much peace was worth, how much silence cost, and whether deep down I still wanted to believe they were capable of changing. I already knew the answer. That morning, I transferred the money. I didn't tell them I did it. I didn't respond to the thank you text that came 7 minutes later. It said, "You have no idea what this means to us. We'll never forget this," which was hilarious considering they'd already forgotten every time before. But for a moment, I'll admit it. It felt like maybe I'd finally bought my way out. Like I'd closed the book and could finally stop flipping back to the chapter where they begged and I gave in. For a week, it stayed quiet. No missed calls, no emergencies, no backhanded compliments or weird, desperate texts from Trevor. My daughter and I started taking walks in the evening again. I even cooked dinner 3 nights in a row, which hadn't happened in months. Then came Thursday. I was finishing up a late report at work when Nicole, a coworker from 2 floors up, tapped on my desk and asked if she could show me something. She looked hesitant. I thought it was another HR memo or some team building sign-up. Instead, she handed me her phone. There on Reddit was a thread from someone named Tamemaster87. And within 2 sentences, I knew it was Trevor. He had posted in a personal finance subreddit, venting about his uptight sister who refuses to help her struggling family, even though she's finally making good money. It wasn't subtle. He wrote about how he and Mom had played her right and got one last payout. He said they made her feel like family again just long enough to cash out. That exact phrase, cash out. And then, and this part stopped me cold, he said they were planning to ask again in a few months. Said, "She's soft. She always comes back." The comments were even worse. Some people called him out, but plenty didn't. Trevor replied to several, mocking me, joking about manipulation tactics that still work, and openly admitting he never planned to get a job. Nicole said, "I didn't want to assume, but I figured it might be about you." Then she walked away respectfully, like someone who'd just seen something she wasn't supposed to. I sat there for 10 minutes staring at the screen. There it was, in public for strangers to laugh at, the full extent of how little I meant to them. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I went cold, completely numb. I didn't even call them out. What was the point? Trevor wasn't sorry. My mom was probably in on it. And my dad, he wouldn't know if the house was on fire unless someone told him and handed him a hose. The next morning, I logged into my bank app. Emergency fund, $174.89. That transfer had cleared everything I had been slowly building for months. Every skipped coffee, every side gig, every long night staring at spreadsheets with one eye open. I sat at the kitchen table watching my daughter eat dry cereal because we were out of milk. And I made a quiet decision right then. This was over. They would never get another cent from me. Not now, not later, not ever. And that decision, that calm, quiet moment of resolve, must have opened something up in the universe because 4 days later, I got an email that changed everything. A recruiter from a major company in another state said they found my name through a niche industry blog post I'd written last year and wanted to talk. The job was a significant step up. Less hours, more pay, full relocation package, a daycare stipend. Felt made up. I scheduled the interview, took it during my lunch break, and 48 hours later they sent an offer. I stared at the screen for 5 full minutes, making sure it wasn't a scam. It wasn't. And that was it. The moment fate handed me the exit I didn't even know I was waiting for. 2 weeks later, I terminated my lease, boxed up our lives, and moved out of state with my daughter. No announcement, no farewell dinner, no texts, just gone. The day we moved, it rained just enough to smear the windows and wash everything clean. It wasn't dramatic. No final confrontation, no shouting match, no slammed doors. Just a quiet goodbye to a city that had drained me dry. I'd lived in that apartment for 4 years. Raised my daughter there, worked nights there, cried in that bathroom more times than I could count. And I left it without looking back. I didn't post a thing. I didn't tell a soul. I packed at night after putting my daughter to bed, boxing up our lives like evidence. Sold the furniture, canceled the lease, left a note for the nanny with a forwarding address and a thank you envelope. She cried when I handed it to her. She didn't ask questions. She just hugged me and told me I was doing the right thing. By the time we hit the highway, it felt like I was slipping out of a skin I should have shed years ago. 8 hours later, we were in a new state. New apartment, higher floor. Sunlight poured in like it had been waiting for us. The walls weren't closing in anymore. My daughter twirled in the empty living room like she already understood we were free. The new job started a week later. Fewer hours, double the pay, and a boss who, on my first day, asked what I needed to succeed. I remember sitting at my new desk staring at my screen thinking, this is mine. All of it. For 12 days, everything was quiet. No missed calls, no guilt texts, no drama. Then, like clockwork, they noticed I was gone. Started with my dad. A single message. Hey, where have you been? Mom said she hasn't heard from you. Everything okay? I didn't answer. 2 hours later, my mom called. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was light, performative. Just checking in, honey. We're a little worried. Haven't seen you online. Hope everything's all right with work and the little one. Let us know. The tone was sweet, but the timing wasn't random. They weren't worried. They were realizing I had disappeared without permission. That the money machine they'd always counted on had unplugged itself and vanished. On day 13, Trevor texted. Casual. Too casual. Mom said you ghosted. That true? You good. I stared at it for a long time. Debated whether to even reply, but something in me wanted them to know. Not the details, just enough. I typed 2 words. I moved. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was my mom. Then again. Then Trevor. Then my dad. I didn't pick up. Trevor sent another text. Moved? Where? Since when? Why didn't you say anything? Then 2 hours of silence. And then came the reason for all the concern. Trevor again. Wait, are you making more now? That's amazing. We're really proud of you. Surely, since you're in a better place now, there's this one thing we were hoping you could help with. Just a short-term thing. There was the real message beneath all the fake concern. They didn't miss me. They missed access. They missed the girl who always answered, who always paid, who never said no. And maybe I should have felt sad about that. But I didn't, because that text, that casual, sleazy attempt to slide back in, confirmed everything I'd always suspected. To them, I was never a person, just a plan. A resource. A tool. And when that tool stopped working the way they wanted, they tried to guilt it, charm it, guilt it again. I didn't respond. I didn't explain. I didn't argue. That night, I blocked them. One by one, my mom, my dad, Trevor, my aunt, even a couple of their friends I knew would try to mediate. Gone. No announcement, no drama. Just off. My daughter and I had dinner on the floor that night. Pizza from a place around the corner, eaten from the box because we didn't have plates yet. She laughed the whole time. Her little face lit up by city lights and something that looked like peace. I realized then, this is what freedom feels like. No one expecting, no one taking, just space. It had been 6 weeks. 6 weeks of real quiet. Not the kind where you're waiting for the phone to light up. The kind where, for the first time in years, silence doesn't mean tension. It means peace. I had kept them blocked. Every single one of them. My parents, Trevor, my aunt, even a couple of their nosy family friends who always had an opinion but never a solution. I didn't just block their numbers. I blocked them in my mind. I stopped wondering what they were doing, if they were talking about me, if they'd try something. And for a while, it worked. In that silence, I finally got to live like a person. My daughter was thriving. She adjusted to the new city faster than I expected. She started telling people our apartment was in the clouds because of how high up we lived. The first time she saw snow from the window, she screamed like it was magic. I kept my routine simple. Wake up early, get her to school, walk to work, be home by dinner. Weekends were sacred, just us. No meetings, no money requests, no pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. The job was better than I thought possible. They respected boundaries, asked for input, and paid me like my time had value. I stopped checking my bank account before buying paper towels. I started keeping fresh fruit in the fridge, not because we needed it, but because we could. I even bought curtains, real ones. Nothing off Craigslist or from a clearance bin. And yet, some small part of me still waited for the crack. The breach, the inevitable one last call, came in the middle of a Thursday. Unknown number. I almost let it ring out, but something told me to pick up. I didn't speak first. There was silence on the line, then a breath, then my mother's voice. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how I was. She said, "We know you moved." That was it. Not "we miss you." Not "we're sorry." Just the quiet resentment of someone who realized the door was locked from the inside. I didn't answer. I waited. She continued, "We're not mad. We just want to talk. Just know where you are. That's all." As if I owed them that. As if the woman who hadn't once offered to help when I was working nights and sleeping 3 hours a day had the right to ask anything. She kept going, her voice all soft and careful, like she was stepping across a frozen lake. "We've been talking a lot, your dad and I, about the past, about how things got twisted. And Trevor, he's growing up. He's been helping around the house. He asks about you. I closed my eyes, counted to 5. Then came the reason for the call. I knew it before she said it. Things are tight again, just temporary. Your dad's work dried up. Trevor's car broke down. And we were hoping. I could practically hear her reaching for the old lines, the ones that used to work. We were hoping you could help. Just this once. You're doing well now, right? That last part hit me harder than I expected. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. I was doing well now, better than ever, and they knew it. And instead of being happy for me, they saw it as a reason to tighten the leash again. This was always the plan. The "we miss you" was just the setup. The "you're doing well" was the trap. The ask was inevitable. I waited a beat, let the silence stretch. Then I said what I'd been holding on to since the day I left. This is the last time we speak. Just that. No rage, no explanation, no apology. I hung up. Then I blocked the number. And that was it. No follow-up, no backup attempts, no cousin texting "what's going on?" Just silence. Real silence. And in that space, something settled inside me. Something that had been knocking around for years, looking for a place to land. It wasn't victory. It wasn't revenge. It was relief. They couldn't reach me anymore. Not through guilt, not through blood, not even through money. I was mine again. It's been almost a year now. We have a rhythm. My daughter loves school. I joined a community garden. I take walks without my phone. I sleep without dread. I don't flinch when unknown numbers call. I know now I owe no one a single part of me they're not willing to value. And sometimes I think about that call. Not what was said, but what wasn't. They never said sorry. And I'm glad. Because I didn't need closure. I needed distance. I gave them everything. Time, money, silence, grace. But the best gift I ever gave them was goodbye. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.